Chapter 1. Nikolai, 5 years ago. I stepped out of the back exit of Purgatory and let the heavy steel door slam shut behind me, cutting off the thumping bass that had been vibrating in my chest for the last 2 hours. The silence of the alley was heavy, broken only by the hiss of tires on wet asphalt and the distant siren that is the city's lullaby. I needed a smoke. I needed a drink. I needed to not be the heir to the Volkov empire for 5 minutes. I cupped my hands to light a cigarette, the flame flaring orange against the gray dampness. That was when I heard the voice. It was not a scared voice. It was annoyed. I turned my head. A girl was standing near the dumpster, arguing with the beefy bouncer who looked like he would rather be anywhere else. She was soaking wet. Her hair was plastered to her skull, dark strands dripping water down a face that was pale with cold, but flushed with irritation. She was holding a silver stiletto in one hand. The heel was snapped clean off. "You cannot go back in that way?" The bouncer grunted, crossing his arms. "I left my purse in there," she argued, gesturing with the broken shoe like it was a weapon. "My keys are in it. My phone is in it. If I do not get back in, I am sleeping on the sidewalk." "Is that what you want? Do you want a frozen girl on your conscience?" The bouncer shrugged. "Not my problem. VIP exit only. Go around to the front." "The line out front is 3 blocks long," she snapped. I took a drag of my cigarette, watching them. She was small, maybe 5'3" without the heels, but she had the posture of someone 6 feet tall. She was shivering, though. The dress she wore was a scrap of blue silk that offered zero protection against a March downpour. I should have stayed out of it. My father always told me not to get involved in civilian problems. "They are ants, Nikolai," he would say. "You do not stop to help an ant cross the road." I walked over. "Let her in, Paulie." The bouncer jumped. He spun around, his eyes widening when he saw me. He dropped his arms instantly, his posture shifting from aggressive to submissive so fast it was almost funny. "Mr. Volkov, I did not see you there." "Let her in," I repeated. "She is cold." Paulie scrambled to open the door, holding it wide. "Go ahead, miss. Sorry about the confusion." The girl did not move. She looked at Paulie, then she looked at me. She narrowed her eyes. Her mascara was smudged under her left eye, giving her a slightly unhinged look that I found strangely attractive. "Who are you?" she asked. "The owner?" "Something like that," I lied. She looked at the open door, then back at me. She shivered violently, her teeth actually chattering. Then she looked at the cigarette in my hand. "I will go in," she said, her voice shaking. "But first, can I have one of those?" I raised an eyebrow. "You want a cigarette? You are freezing to death." "It warms the lungs," she countered. "Please, I have had a night." I pulled the pack from my jacket pocket and shook one out. She took it with trembling fingers. I flicked my lighter. She leaned in, shielding the flame with her hand. Her skin brushed mine. It was ice cold, but the contact sent a jolt of heat straight up my arm. She took a long drag and exhaled a plume of smoke that mixed with the rainy mist. She slumped against the brick wall, closing her eyes for a second. "Thank you. You are a lifesaver." Literally. I was contemplating stabbing him with my broken shoe. I glanced at the stiletto in her hand. It would not have done much damage. "Paulie has a thick skull." She laughed. It was a rusty, tired sound, but it made her face light up. She opened her eyes and looked at me properly for the first time. Her eyes were dark, intelligent, and way too perceptive. "I am Elena," she said. "Nikolai." "Well, Nikolai. Nice suit. It costs more than my tuition, doesn't it?" Probably, I admitted. She hummed, taking another drag. She kicked off her other shoe, standing barefoot on the wet concrete. Better. Being lopsided was making me seasick. You are standing in a puddle, I pointed out. I am already wet. What is a little more water? She looked up at the sky, letting the rain hit her face. So, Nikolai, why are you hiding in an alley? I am not hiding. I am smoking. You are hiding. You have that look. Like you want to run away, but you forgot where you parked your car. I huffed a laugh. I did not expect to be psychoanalyzed by a barefoot girl in an alley. I am a nursing student, she said, pointing the cigarette at me. I observe people. It is what I do. You look tired, Nikolai. Not sleep tired, soul tired. I stared at her. The rain was matting my hair to my forehead, soaking through the shoulders of my jacket. I should have gone inside. I should have gone back to the VIP booth, to the vodka and the models and the sycophants who laughed at my jokes because they were afraid not to. But I didn't want to. I wanted to stand here with this girl who had no idea who I was. You are good, I said. I am excellent, she corrected. She shivered again, harder this time. You are turning blue, I said. Here. I shrugged off my suit jacket. It was heavy, Italian wool, lined with silk. I draped it over her shoulders. It swallowed her whole. She pulled the lapels tight, burying her nose in the fabric. It smells like expensive cologne and bad decisions, she mumbled. That is my signature scent. She smiled. A real smile this time. It hit me in the chest like a physical blow. The air in the alley suddenly felt very thin. The noise of the city faded into the background, leaving just the sound of her breathing and the rain. She looked up at me. We were close. Too close. I could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. I could see the pulse jumping in her throat. You are not so bad, Nikolai, she whispered. For a rich guy. You don't know me, Elena. Maybe I want to. The invitation hung between us, heavy and dangerous. I knew I should step back. I knew I should walk away. My world was not built for girls like her. My world was blood and violence and cold calculations. She was soft edges and bright eyes. I would ruin her. But I was 22 and I was selfish. I leaned in. She didn't pull away. She tilted her head back, her lips parting slightly. I kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate. It tasted like rain and tobacco and cherry lip gloss. Her hands came up to clutch the front of my shirt, pulling me closer. I groaned low in my throat, pinning her against the rough brick wall. My hands tangled in her wet hair. She made a soft noise against my mouth that drove me absolutely crazy. For 10 seconds, I wasn't the heir. I wasn't a soldier. I was just a man with a beautiful girl in his arms. We broke apart, gasping. Her lips were swollen, her eyes blown wide. Wow, she breathed. Yeah, I rasped. Wow. She fumbled in the pocket of my jacket that she was wearing. She pulled out a napkin from the club and a pen. She scribbled something on it against the wall, the paper damp and tearing slightly. She shoved it into my hand. Call me, she said. Tomorrow, pick me up. We can go somewhere that doesn't smell like garbage juice. I looked at the number, Elena, and a string of digits. I will, I promised. I will pick you up at 8. She grinned, looking young and hopeful and beautiful. Okay. 8. Don't be late, Nikolai. She turned to go back inside, still wearing my jacket. I watched her go, feeling a grin spreading across my own face. I felt light. I felt like maybe there was a version of my life where I could just be Nikolai. Then my phone rang. The sound was sharp, cutting through the rain. I pulled it out. It was Uncle Ivan. I answered, still smiling. Ivan, what is… Nikolai. His voice was a scream, a raw animal sound that froze the blood in my veins. Ivan? What happened? They are gone, Nikolai. They are all gone. Who? Who is gone? Your father. Your mother. The car. Ivan sobbed, a horrible, broken noise. They started the engine and… God, Nikolai, there is nothing left. It was a bomb. They are dead. The world stopped. The rain stopped. The noise stopped. My heart stopped. I stared at the brick wall where I had just kissed Elena. I could still taste her on my lips, but the taste was turning to ash. Nikolai? Ivan's voice was sharp now, commanding. Listen to me. You are the Pakan now. You understand? You are the head of the family. You need to get to the safe house. Now. Do not trust anyone. Do not stop. I am the Pakan. The words settled over me like a shroud. The boy who had laughed 5 minutes ago was dead. He died in the explosion with his parents. I looked down at the napkin in my hand. Elena's number. The ink was starting to bleed from the rain. I couldn't call her. I couldn't pick her up at 8. I couldn't be the guy she thought I was. I was a target now. I was a killer in training. I was poison. If I called her, I would bring my war to her doorstep. I lifted my hand to throw the paper into the dirty puddle at my feet. It was the right thing to do, the noble thing. But I couldn't do it. My hand shook. I clenched my fist around the damp paper, crushing it into a tight ball. I shoved it deep into my pocket, right against my hip. I turned my back on the club. I turned my back on Elena. I walked to the black SUV waiting at the curb. The driver opened the door. I slid into the dark leather interior. Drive, I said. The lock clicked shut.
Chapter 2. Elena. The fluorescent lights of the pediatric ward hummed with a sound that burrowed straight into my skull. It was 3 a.m., the witching hour. The time when fevers spiked and terrified parents pressed call buttons just to hear a human voice tell them everything was going to be okay. I sat at the nurse's station, rubbing the back of my neck. My coffee was cold. It was always cold. Elena, Dr. Peterson needs the chart for the asthmatic in room 4, Sarah called out from down the hall. I grabbed the clipboard and walked it over. My feet ached. I had been on them for 10 hours, and I still had 2 to go. This was my life. Quiet. Exhausting. Predictable. I liked predictable. Predictable meant safe. Predictable meant I paid my rent on time and didn't have to worry about men in expensive suits leaving me standing in the rain. I handed the chart to the doctor and went back to my station. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I frowned. Nobody called me at 3:00 a.m. My mom was asleep in Florida. My landlord only texted about the rent on the 1st. I pulled it out. The number was unknown. I hesitated, then answered. Hello? Elena? The voice was thin, weak, but I knew it instantly. It was a voice from a lifetime ago, from dorm rooms and late-night pizza, and dreams that felt too big for our small-town lungs. Katya, I whispered. There was a pause on the other end. A ragged breath. I didn't think you would answer. I almost dropped the phone. It had been 5 years. 5 years since she stopped returning my texts. 5 years since she missed our graduation. 5 years since she married some rich businessman and vanished off the face of the earth. I thought she had outgrown me. I thought she looked at our friendship and saw a charity case she didn't need anymore. Why are you calling, Kat? I asked, my voice harder than I intended. It is 3 a.m. I need you, Elena. 3 words. They cracked the armor I had built around the memory of her. She didn't sound like the girl who had ghosted me. She sounded terrified. What is wrong? I am sick, she said. Her voice broke. I am dying, Elle. The hospital sounds, the beeping monitors, the squeak of shoes on tile. faded away. I sat down heavily in my chair. What? Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. The doctors say... She trailed off, a wet, choking sound escaping her throat. They say weeks, maybe less. I closed my eyes. The anger vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp grief. Katya was 26. She was vibrant. She was the girl who danced on tables and made me laugh until soda came out of my nose. She wasn't supposed to be dying. "Where are you?" I asked. "I will come see you." "I am at the estate in the Hamptons." "But Elle, it is not just me. It is Sasha." "Sasha, my daughter." "She is 4. A daughter." She had a daughter I didn't know about. The silence between us suddenly felt miles wide, filled with secrets I hadn't been part of. "I need help," Katya whispered. "I fired the nurses." "You fired them? Why?" "You need care, Kat. You can't do this alone." "They were watching me," she hissed. The fear in her voice spiked. "They were reporting everything to his uncle, every breath I took, every time I stumbled. They were vultures, Elena, waiting for me to die so they could clear the board. I couldn't trust them with Sasha." "His uncle? Who is his uncle?" "Just come. Please, you are the only one I trust. You are the only one who loved me before I was Mrs. Volkov." Volkov. The name sounded heavy, expensive, dangerous. I looked around the ward. Safe. Predictable. I looked at the phone. "I will be there," I said. I hung up and walked straight to the charge nurse. I told her it was a family emergency. I told her I didn't know when I would be back. She looked at my face, saw the blood drained from my cheeks, and didn't argue. I drove home in a daze, packed a bag with enough scrubs and jeans to last a week, and got in my beat-up Honda Civic. The drive to the Hamptons usually took 3 hours. I made it in 2.5. The sun was just starting to bleed gray light over the horizon when I pulled up to the address Katya had texted me. It wasn't a house. It was a fortress. Stone walls rose 10 feet high, topped with iron spikes. A massive steel gate blocked the driveway. There was a guard booth that looked more like a military checkpoint than a residential entrance. I rolled down my window as a man in a dark uniform stepped out. He had a gun on his hip. A real gun, not a taser, not a baton. A pistol. "Name?" he barked. "Elena. Elena Rossi. I am here to see Katya, Mrs. Volkov." He didn't smile. He didn't look at my face. He looked down at a tablet in his hand, scrolling with a gloved finger. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was a mistake. "I was a nurse from Queens. I didn't belong here." "Rossi," he muttered. "Yeah, you are on the list." He tapped the screen and the massive gates groaned open. "Drive straight up," he said. "Do not stop. Do not take pictures." I nodded, my throat too dry to speak. I drove through, the gravel crunching loudly under my tires. The driveway wound through acres of manicured lawn that looked unnatural in the gray dawn light. And then the house appeared. It was a sprawling mansion of dark stone and glass, looking out over the ocean. It was beautiful, cold and imposing. It looked like a mausoleum. I parked behind a sleek black SUV that cost more than my entire education. I grabbed my duffel bag and walked to the front door. It was solid oak, tall enough for a giant. I raised my hand to knock, but the door opened before I could touch it. A housekeeper stood there. She looked tired. Her uniform was crisp, but her eyes were weary. "Miss Rossi?" "Yes. Mrs. Volkov is expecting you. She is resting right now, but she said to show you to the guest suite." I stepped into the foyer. I stopped breathing. The space was massive. A chandelier the size of a car hung from the ceiling. Marble floors stretched out like a frozen lake. A grand staircase curved up to the second floor, the railing made of intricate, dark iron. But it wasn't the wealth that froze my blood. It was the man walking down the stairs. He was buttoning the cuff of a white dress shirt, his movements sharp and precise. He wore black suit trousers that fit him perfectly. He was tall, broad, commanding. He looked up as his foot hit the marble landing. Our eyes locked. The air left the room. It was him. The hair was the same dark, messy wave, though now it was cut shorter, sharper. The jaw was harder, covered in the shadow of a day-old beard. The eyes were the same dark, intense pools that I had drowned in for 10 minutes in a rainy alley 5 years ago. Nikolai, the boy who had given me his jacket, the boy who had kissed me like he was starving, the boy who had promised to pick me up and never showed. He stopped dead. His hand froze on his cufflink. He stared at me. There was no recognition at first, just the cold, flat gaze of a stranger. And then something flickered. A spark in the darkness. His eyes widened, just a fraction. His gaze dropped to my wet boots, then swept up to my face, lingering on my mouth. It was a look of pure, unadulterated shock. Elena? His voice was deeper, rougher. It scraped over my skin like sandpaper. I gripped the strap of my bag until my knuckles turned white. I felt sick. I felt dizzy. The world tilted on its axis. "You," I whispered. He took a step toward me, then stopped. His face shuddered. The shock vanished, replaced by a mask of stone. He looked at the housekeeper, then back at me. "What are you doing here?" he asked. His tone wasn't warm. It was an accusation. "I am here for Katya," I managed to say, my voice shaking. His jaw tightened. A muscle ticked in his cheek. "Katya is my wife." The words were a physical blow. I actually took a step back. Wife? Katya was Mrs. Volkov. Katya was the woman dying in the room upstairs. And Nikolai, the boy from the alley, was her husband. The universe wasn't just cruel. It was laughing at me. I looked at him. Really looked at him. The expensive suit. The cold eyes. The gun I could now see tucked into a holster beneath his open jacket. "You never called," I said. It was a stupid thing to say. A childish thing. But it was the only thought my brain could process. He looked at me, and for a second the mask slipped. I saw the ghost of the boy from the alley. I saw regret. I saw pain. I saw a man who was drowning. And then it was gone. "Go home, Elena," he said quietly. "You do not belong here." I straightened my spine. I thought of Katya's terrified voice on the phone. I thought of the little girl I hadn't met yet. "I am not going anywhere," I said. He stared at me for a long beat. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the massive house. I was left standing in the foyer, shivering, just like I had been in the alley 5 years ago. But this time, nobody offered me a jacket.
Chapter 3. My life was a cage built of gold bars and blood money. I stepped out of the shower and wiped the steam from the mirror. The face staring back at me was 5 years older than the boy who had stood in that alley, but it felt 50 years dead. The eyes were hollow. The mouth was set in a permanent line of grim endurance. I had been back in New York for exactly 1 hour. Moscow had been brutal. 6 weeks of freezing negotiations, vodka that tasted like lighter fluid, and arms shipments that barely made it past the border. I was exhausted. My bones ached. But I didn't go to sleep. I couldn't. I had a marriage to end. I dressed mechanically, black trousers, a white dress shirt. I didn't button the cuffs yet. I needed to feel the air on my skin a little longer before I suffocated myself in the suit of the Pakhan. For 4 years, this house had been a battleground. Katya and I lived in separate wings, existing in a cold war of silence and resentment. We were business partners who hated the business. The only good thing to come out of this hell was Sasha. Sasha. My chest tightened. She was the result of one drunken night of duty 4 years ago, a momentary lapse of judgment where we both tried to find comfort in the wrong place. We didn't find comfort. but we made a miracle. She was the only light in this mausoleum. But a child wasn't enough to save a marriage that was dead on arrival. I walked down the long, silent hallway toward Katya's wing. The air smelled sterile here, unlived in. I was going to offer her a generous settlement. She could keep the house, the money, the status. I just wanted my name back. I wanted out. I didn't knock. I pushed the door to the master suite open, the words of the divorce proposal already forming on my tongue. I stopped dead. The room was dim, the heavy curtains drawn against the morning sun. But even in the shadows, I could see that the woman in the bed wasn't the cold, perfectly put-together socialite I had left 6 weeks ago. She was a ghost. Katya was sleeping, but her breathing was wet and ragged. Her skin was translucent, stretched too tight over cheekbones that looked sharp enough to cut glass. Her hair, usually glossy and full, looked thin against the pillow. There was an IV stand next to the bed, a clear bag of fluid dripping a slow, rhythmic countdown. The divorce speech died in my throat. What the hell happened? I walked further into the room, my footsteps silent on the thick carpet. I looked for a chart, a prescription bottle, anything to explain why my wife looked like she was fading out of existence. I checked the nightstand. There were pills, morphine, anti-nausea meds, and tucked under a box of tissues, barely visible, was a phone. It wasn't her usual iPhone. It was a cheap plastic burner. I frowned. Katya didn't do burner phones. She didn't do secrets. She was too proud for them. I picked it up. It was dead. The screen remained black when I pressed the button. A suspicion, cold and ugly, coiled in my gut. I looked around the room. Her vanity was a mess of jewelry and perfumes. I yanked open the top drawer of her nightstand. Nothing but lotions. I moved to the dresser, rummaging through the junk drawer with a frantic energy I couldn't explain. I found a tangled nest of cables. I tried one. Too big. I tried another. Too small. Finally, I found a frayed micro USB. I plugged it into the wall and connected the phone. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the device. My heart hammered against my ribs, a heavy, dull rhythm. 1 minute. The red battery icon appeared. 2 minutes. Katya shifted in her sleep, moaning softly. 5 minutes. The screen lit up. I swiped to unlock. It asked for a passcode. I hesitated. I didn't know her favorite color. I didn't know the name of her first pet. I realized, with a pang of guilt, that I didn't know my wife at all. I tried the obvious. 000. Incorrect. I tried our wedding anniversary. Incorrect. I looked at the sleeping woman, then typed in 4 digits. Sasha's birthday. The phone unlocked. I went straight to the messages. There was only one thread. No name saved, just a number. I miss you, the most recent one read. It was sent 3 days ago. I'm scared, she had written a week before that. It hurts today. I just want to hear your voice. He's coming back soon, the stranger had replied. You have to tell him. I can't, she typed. He hates me. He'll just be glad it's finally over. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. I scrolled back. It went on for 2 months. It wasn't sexual. There were no nude photos, no explicit fantasies. It was intimate in a way that felt far more damaging. It was naked vulnerability. She was telling this stranger her fears, her pain, her loneliness. She was giving him the parts of herself she had never once shown me. She had cheated. Not with her body. She was clearly too sick for that. But with her heart. She had sought comfort in the arms of a ghost because her husband was a statue. Nikolai? The voice was a whisper, dry as dead leaves. I looked up. Katya was watching me. Her eyes were sunken, dark circles bruising the skin beneath them. She didn't look guilty. She looked relieved. "You found it," she rasped. I held up the phone. "Who is he? Does it matter?" She tried to sit up but failed, collapsing back against the pillows. "Just an old memory. Someone I knew before. Before you." "You cheated," I said. The anger was there, but it felt hollow. It had no teeth. "I was dying, Nikolai," she whispered. Tears welled in her eyes, tracking through the hollows of her cheeks. "I got the diagnosis 2 months ago. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctors gave me a timeline that sounded like a joke." I stared at her. "Stage 4. Why didn't you tell me?" "You were in Moscow," she said. "You were being the Pakhan. And we aren't exactly friends, are we?" That stung. "So you found a boyfriend instead?" "I found a human being." Her voice rose, cracking. "I had a manic break, Nikolai. They told me I was going to be dead before summer, and I panicked. I wanted to feel something other than fear. I wanted to remember what it was like to be looked at with something other than indifference." She started to cry, ugly, gasping sobs that shook her frail body. I realized then that I was the villain of this story. I had locked her in this tower, ignored her, and now I was judging her for trying to find a window. I stood up. I felt trapped. The walls of the room seemed to be closing in. "I came here to ask for a divorce," I said quietly. Katya laughed. It was a wet, gurgling sound. "Of course you did. Well, you won't have to wait long. Nature is handling the paperwork for you." I looked at the phone in my hand, then placed it gently back on the nightstand. "I can't divorce you, Katya. Why not? Because of the optics? Because the great Nikolai Volkov can't leave a dying woman?" "Yes," I said. "And because you are the mother of my child." I turned away. I couldn't look at her. I couldn't handle the smell of sickness and the weight of my own failure. "I need a drink," I muttered. I walked out of the room, leaving the door open behind me. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't draw a full breath. I walked to the grand staircase. I needed to get out of this house. I needed to breathe air that didn't taste like regret. I started down the marble steps, my hands moving automatically to button the cuffs of my shirt. I focused on the task, on the small, precise movement of the button sliding through the fabric. It was the only thing I could control. Left cuff, snap. Right cuff. My foot hit the marble landing of the foyer. I looked up, and my heart stopped beating for the second time in my life. Standing in the center of the foyer, looking like a hallucination conjured by my own desperate mind, was her, Elena. She looked exactly the same, and completely different. She was wearing scrubs and a tired expression, clutching a duffel bag like a shield. But the eyes, those dark, intelligent eyes, were the same. The shock hit me like a physical wave. I froze. My hand stopped on my cufflink. For a second, I thought I had finally cracked. I thought the stress and the guilt had broken my brain. Elena? The name tore out of my throat, rough and disbelief-laden. She looked at me, and I saw the recognition hit her. I saw the color drain from her face. "You," she whispered. I took a step toward her. My brain was misfiring. Why was she here? How was she here? Was she the nurse? Was she a ghost? And then the reality crashed down on me. Katya had said she fired the nurses. Katya had said she called someone she trusted. My wife's best friend. The college roommate she never talked about. Elena. The universe wasn't just cruel, it was sadistic. I looked at her, at the woman I had spent 5 years trying to forget. The woman whose number was currently sitting in a safe behind a painting in my study. And I realized, with a terrifying clarity, that my cage had just been locked from the outside.
Chapter 4. Elena. The silence in the Volkov estate wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. It pressed against my eardrums like deep water, suffocating and cold. I sat at the kitchen island, staring at the assortment of amber pill bottles lined up on the granite. Morphine, Zofran, Dilaudid. A chemical cocktail meant to blur the edges of a reality that was too sharp to handle. It had been 3 days. 3 days of watching Katya fade. 3 days of learning that Sasha liked her toast cut into triangles and was terrified of the dark. 3 days of tiptoeing around a house that felt more like a fortress than a home. And 3 days of dodging Nikolai. He was a ghost in his own house. I heard his heavy footsteps in the hallway late at night. I smelled the lingering scent of his tobacco on the patio in the morning. But whenever I entered a room, he was leaving it. He treated me like a contagion. Like if he stood too close, he might catch whatever past we shared. I rubbed my temples. My shift at the hospital felt like a vacation compared to the emotional minefield of this kitchen. I stood up to put the kettle on. I needed tea. I needed caffeine. I needed to stop thinking about the way his eyes had looked in the foyer. Shocked, then devastatingly cold. The sound of the front door opening shattered the silence. Heavy boots on marble, the distinct click of a lock turning. I froze. It was past midnight. Nikolai walked into the kitchen. He didn't see me at first. He went straight for the crystal decanter on the sidebar. He poured a glass of whiskey, the amber liquid splashing violently against the sides. He didn't add ice. He downed half of it in one swallow, his head tipping back, his throat working. He looked wrecked. His white dress shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, the tie gone. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing forearms corded with tension. He looked like a man who had spent the last 12 hours fighting a war he was losing. I should have stayed quiet. I should have slipped out the back way and left him to his misery. But I was tired. I was angry. And I was done being a ghost. "You're drinking the good stuff," I said. He spun around. His hand went to his hip, a reflex fast and terrifying, before he registered who I was. He relaxed, but only barely. The tension remained in his shoulders, a coiled spring waiting to snap. Elena. He said my name like it was a curse. "You're up late," he said, turning back to his drink. "Hard to sleep in a mausoleum," I countered. He didn't laugh. He just stared at the dark liquid in his glass. "Go to bed, Elena." "No." He paused, the glass halfway to his mouth. He turned his head slowly to look at me. His eyes were dark, rimmed with red. "Excuse me?" I said no. I crossed my arms over my chest, leaning against the counter. "I'm not going to bed. And I'm not going to hide in the guest room every time you decide to grace us with your presence." He turned fully toward me then. He was big. In the alley 5 years ago he had seemed large, but here, in his kitchen, he took up all the air in the room. "I am not hiding from you," he said, his voice low and rough. "Really? Because I haven't seen you since I got here. You leave before sunrise. You come back when the house is asleep. You're avoiding me, Nikolai. I am working. I have a business to run. A business that keeps you away from your dying wife and your daughter?" His jaw tightened. A muscle ticked in his cheek. "Do not speak about things you do not understand." "I understand that Katya cries out for you when the morphine wears off," I snapped. "I understand that Sasha asks me every morning if Papa is coming home for dinner. I understand that you are a coward." The glass slammed onto the counter. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. He was in my space in 2 strides. He towered over me, radiating heat and anger and the sharp, spicy scent of whiskey. I am many things, Elena, he growled, leaning down until his face was inches from mine. But I am not a coward. Then why didn't you call? The question flew out of my mouth before I could stop it. It wasn't about Katya. It wasn't about Sasha. It was about me. It was about 5 years of wondering what I had done wrong. He blinked, taken aback by the shift. What? That night, I said, my voice trembling slightly. In the alley. You gave me your jacket. You kissed me. You promised to pick me up at 8. I waited, Nikolai. I sat in my dorm lobby for 4 hours. I called the number you gave me and it was disconnected. I waited for an answer. I waited for him to say he lost the number, that he got busy, that he forgot. He stared at me, his expression unreadable. I did you a favor? He said flatly. A favor? I let out a harsh, incredulous laugh. Ghosting me was a favor? Making me feel like a fool was a favor? Yes. Why? Because look at me, Elena. He gestured to himself, to the dark house, to the invisible weight pressing down on him. Look at where I am. Look at what I am. You think you wanted this? You think a nursing student from Queens belonged in this world? I didn't care about your world, I said. I liked the guy in the alley. That guy is dead, he said brutally. He died 5 minutes after you walked back into that club. He turned to walk away, dismissing me. Dismissing us. I grabbed his arm. It was a mistake. His muscles were hard as iron under my fingers. He stopped, looking down at my hand on his arm like it was a foreign object. Don't walk away from me, I said. Not again. He looked at me. His gaze dropped to my mouth, then back up to my eyes. The air between us suddenly changed. It charged with electricity, thick and suffocating. The anger morphed into something else, something hot and desperate. He took a step closer, forcing me back until my hips hit the marble counter. He caged me in, his hands gripping the edge of the granite on either side of my waist. You want to know why I didn't call? He rasped. Yes. He leaned in. I could feel his breath on my cheek. I could see the flecks of gold in his dark irises. My heart was hammering so hard, I thought he must be able to hear it. I didn't call because I wanted to. I stared at him, confused. That doesn't make sense. I wanted to call you every day, he whispered, his voice dropping to a low rumble that vibrated in my chest. I wanted to hear your voice. I wanted to see if you were still wearing that blue dress. I wanted to know if you were safe. Then why didn't you? Because I am poison, Elena. He said it with such conviction, such self-loathing, that it broke my heart. He leaned closer, his nose brushing against mine. His gaze dropped to my lips again. I parted them, a silent invitation. I forgot about Katya upstairs. I forgot about the years of silence. I just wanted him to close the distance. I wanted to ruin you, he murmured. I wanted to drag you into the dark with me. But I couldn't do it. He closed his eyes, his forehead resting against mine. We stood there for a heartbeat, breathing the same air, suspended in a moment that felt both fragile and inevitable. Then he pulled back. He stepped away, putting distance between us. The loss of his warmth was physical. I shivered. Come with me, he said. What? You think I forgot you? You think you were just some girl in an alley? Come with me. He turned and walked out of the kitchen. I hesitated for a second, then followed him. He led me through the silent house, down a hallway lined with portraits of stern-looking men, who all shared his dark eyes. He opened a set of double doors at the end of the hall. The study. It smelled of old books and leather. A massive mahogany desk dominated the room. Behind it hung a painting, a moody, abstract seascape in grays and blacks. Nikolai walked behind the desk. He didn't look at me. He reached for the frame of the painting and swung it outward. A safe. He punched in a code. The keypad beeped, and the heavy steel door swung open. He reached inside. He didn't pull out money. He didn't pull out a gun. He pulled out a small yellowed piece of paper. He walked over to me and held it out. I took it. My hands were shaking. It was a cocktail napkin. The paper was stiff and wrinkled, stained with watermarks that had dried years ago. The ink was faded, bleeding into the fibers, but I could still read it. Elena. And my phone number. I stared at it. The breath left my lungs. You kept it, I whispered. I looked up at him. He was watching me, his face stripped of its usual mask. He looked vulnerable. He looked young. I didn't just keep it, he said softly. He walked over to the window, looking out at the dark grounds. 4 years ago, I came to find you. I froze. You what? I was in the city. I had just taken full control of the Bratva. I told myself I deserved a reward. I drove to the hospital where you were doing your clinicals. I stared at his back. He had been there? He had been close? I saw you, he continued, his voice devoid of emotion. You were walking out with a group of friends. You were laughing. You looked light. You looked happy. You were wearing pink scrubs and you had a coffee stain on your shirt. I subconsciously touched my chest. I remembered those scrubs. I sat in my car and I watched you, he said. I had this napkin in my pocket. I had my phone in my hand. All I had to do was get out. All I had to do was say your name. He turned to face me. The pain in his eyes was raw. But then I looked at my hands. I looked at the blood that you can't wash off. And I looked at you. You were so bright, Elena. You were everything I wasn't. If I stepped out of that car, I would have dimmed your light. I would have brought my war to your doorstep. He took a step toward me, stopping just out of reach. So I drove away. I put the number in that safe and I told myself that leaving you alone was the only decent thing I would ever do in my life. I looked down at the napkin in my hand. He hadn't ghosted me because he didn't care. He had ghosted me because he cared too much. It was noble. It was tragic. And it made me want to scream. You didn't get to decide that for me, I said, my voice thick with tears. You made a choice for both of us, Nikolai. You decided I was too weak to handle your world. No, he said sharply. Not weak. Too good. I stepped closer to him, invading his space this time. I held up the napkin. I am not a porcelain doll. I am not something you put on a shelf to keep clean. I am a person. And I spent 5 years thinking I wasn't enough. You were everything, he rasped. Then why are we standing here like strangers? Because I am married to your dying best friend, he said brutally. The reality of it crashed back into the room. Katya, the cancer, the burner phone, the tangled mess of duty and loyalty and death. He ran a hand through his hair, destroying the perfect style. I am going to hell, Elena. I have a reserved seat, but I won't drag you down with me. He walked to the door. He stopped with his hand on the handle. Put the napkin back in the safe when you are done, he said, his voice rough. I can't look at it anymore. He walked out, leaving me standing in the center of his cage, holding a 5-year-old piece of trash like it was the most precious thing in the world. I looked at the napkin. I looked at the safe. I didn't put it back. I folded it carefully, terrified it would crumble, and slid it into the pocket of my scrubs. He might have given up on us 5 years ago, but I was just getting started. I walked out of the study, the paper burning a hole against my hip, and went back to the kitchen to make my tea. The silence in the house was still heavy. But now, it felt less like a tomb and more like the calm before a storm.
Chapter 5. Nikolai. The smell of old money and decay was particularly strong in my Uncle Ivan's office. It smelled of mahogany, imported cigars, and the distinct, metallic tang of ambition. I sat in the leather wingback chair opposite his desk, keeping my posture relaxed, my face blank. Inside, I was vibrating with the urge to put a bullet in the wall. Or his knee. "So," Ivan said, leaning back in his chair. He swirled the brandy in his snifter, the crystal catching the light. "How is the grieving husband act coming along?" "It is not an act," I said flatly. "Katya is dying." Ivan waved a hand dismissively. Yes, tragic, but convenient, no?" I tightened my grip on the armrest until the leather creaked. "Careful, Ivan." He chuckled, a dry sound that grated on my nerves. "Don't be sentimental, Nikolai. It doesn't suit you. You have been burdened with a dead-end alliance for 4 years. The Volkov bloodline is stagnant. We need heirs, male heirs. And Katya, well, she gave us a girl." He said girl like it was a disease. "Sasha is a Volkov," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "She is my heir. She is a child, and a female. She cannot hold the territory when the sharks start circling. And they are circling, nephew. The Italians are getting restless in Jersey. The triads are pushing into the docks. We need strength. We need a new alliance." "I know the speech," I said. "I have heard it every Sunday dinner for a year." "Then act on it." Ivan leaned forward, his eyes hard and shiny like polished stones. "The doctor says she has weeks, maybe months," he said. "That is too long, Nikolai. We cannot be in limbo while our enemies sharpen their knives. Perhaps we could help nature take its course?" The room went dead silent. I stared at him. I looked at the man who had raised me after my parents died, the man who had taught me how to shoot, how to negotiate, how to bleed a rival dry. And for the first time, I didn't just see my uncle. I saw a monster. "Are you suggesting I murder my wife?" I asked softly. "I am suggesting mercy," he countered smoothly. "An overdose of morphine, a slip of the hand. It would be painless. She is suffering, isn't she? Why prolong it? Why prolong the inevitable when the future of the Bratva is at stake?" I stood up. I didn't rush. I unfolded my frame slowly, towering over the desk. Ivan didn't flinch, but his eyes flickered. "If you ever suggest that again," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "I will forget that we share blood." Ivan sighed, looking disappointed. "You are soft, Nikolai. Your father was soft too. That is what got him killed." I walked to the door before I did something I couldn't undo. I stopped with my hand on the brass knob. Katya dies when she dies, not a second sooner. And if anything happens to her, anything unnatural, I will burn this city to the ground to find the person responsible. Do we understand each other? Ivan raised his glass in a mock toast. "Perfectly, nephew. Give my love to the little one." I slammed. The door behind me, the sound echoing through the empty hallway. I drove home like a maniac. I took corners too fast, the tires screeching in protest. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, soft. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was soft. A real Pakan would have suffocated Katya with a pillow months ago and married the Italian Don's daughter by now. A real Pakan wouldn't be keeping a 5-year-old napkin in a safe. I pulled through the gates of the estate, the guards waving me through. I parked the car and sat there for a moment, waiting for the adrenaline to fade. It didn't. I needed to see Sasha. I needed to see the one thing in this world that wasn't tainted by politics or blood. I walked into the house. It was quiet, but not the heavy, suffocating silence of the last few weeks. I heard giggling. I frowned. I followed the sound through the foyer and out the French doors onto the back patio. The garden was in full bloom, a riot of hydrangeas and roses that Katya used to obsess over before she got sick. The sun was setting, casting long golden shadows across the grass, and there they were. Sasha was crouching behind a large stone fountain, her small hands covering her mouth to stifle a laugh. She was wearing a yellow sundress I hadn't seen before. Her dark curls were bouncing as she tried to make herself small. "Count to 10, she shrieked. I froze. Elena was standing by the rose bushes, her back to me. She was wearing jeans and a simple white t-shirt, her hair pulled up in a messy bun. She was leaning against a trellis, her face buried in her arms. 1, 2, 3. She counted loud and exaggerated. 4! Sasha yelled from her hiding spot. Elena laughed. "Honey, you aren't supposed to help me." I watched them. My chest ached. It was a physical pain, sharp and breathtaking. This was it. This was the life I had watched from my car 4 years ago. This was the normalcy I had denied myself. Seeing Elena here, playing with my daughter in my garden, it felt like a hallucination. It felt like a dream I was going to wake up from any second. 7, 8, 9. I took a step forward. The gravel crunched under my boot. Elena spun around. Her eyes went wide when she saw me. She froze, her hand flying to her chest. 10, I said softly. Sasha popped up from behind the fountain. "Papa!" She ran at me, a little missile of joy. I dropped to one knee just in time to catch her. She slammed into my chest, wrapping her small arms around my neck. She smelled like baby shampoo and grass stains. I buried my face in her hair, breathing her in. The darkness of Ivan's office, the threat of the Italians, the guilt. It all receded for a second. "You're home," she squealed. "Elena said you were working, but I said Papa always comes back." I looked up over her shoulder. Elena was watching us. Her expression was soft, unguarded. She wasn't looking at the Pakan. She was looking at a father. I pulled back to look at Sasha. Her face was smudged with dirt. She looked happy. She looked alive. "I am home, Zaichionok," I said, tucking a curl behind her ear. "What are you doing out here?" "We are playing hide and seek," Sasha announced. "Elena is really bad at it. She counts too slow." "Hey!" Elena protested, a smile tugging at her lips. "I count perfectly. You just hide too fast." I stood up, lifting Sasha into my arms. She rested her head on my shoulder, her thumb finding its way to her mouth, a habit she only did when she was tired or safe. "Can you play, Papa?" she asked, her voice muffled against my suit jacket. "Please, just one round?" I should say no. I had calls to make. I had security protocols to review. I had a dying wife upstairs who was a constant reminder of my failures. But I looked at Elena. She was biting her lip, waiting for me to be the monster, waiting for me to dismiss them and go back to my office. I looked at my daughter. "I can play," I said. Sasha cheered. Elena's eyebrows shot up. "Really?" she asked. "In a $3,000 suit?" I smirked at her. "It is 4,000. And yes," I set Sasha down. "Go hide, no peeking." She took off running toward the gazebo, giggling uncontrollably. I turned to Elena. She crossed her arms, leaning back against the trellis. She looked out of place in this manicured garden, like a wildflower growing in a greenhouse. She was beautiful. "You are good with her," I said. She shrugged. "Kids are easy. They just want to be seen." "Unlike their fathers," I murmured. She held my gaze. "I see you, Nikolai." The air between us charged again, that magnetic pull that had been there since the alley. I wanted to step closer. I wanted to touch the stray lock of hair falling over her cheek. "You shouldn't be here, Elena," I said, but the words lacked heat. So you keep telling me. Ivan, my uncle, he is pushing. Pushing for what? For the end, I said darkly. Her face fell. The playfulness vanished. Katya. He thinks I am weak for letting her linger. He wants me to move on. Move on? She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a fierce whisper. She isn't a piece of furniture you replace, Nikolai. She is a person. I know that. Do you? Because you are out here playing house while she is up there fading away. The accusation hit its mark. I am not playing house, I snapped. I am trying to give my daughter 10 minutes of happiness before her world implodes. Do you think this is easy for me? Do you think I want to be the man waiting for his wife to die so he can save his territory? I stepped into her space. I couldn't help it. Being near her was an addiction I had tried to kick for 5 years, and I was failing miserably. I am trying to keep them safe, Elena. From Ivan. From the life. From me. She didn't back down. She tilted her chin up, her eyes flashing. We don't need you to save us from yourself, Nikolai. We need you to just be here. Papa, come find me! Sasha yelled from across the lawn. The moment broke. I stepped back, running a hand down my face. I have to go find her. Elena watched me. She didn't smile. She didn't offer forgiveness. Start counting, she said. I turned around and closed my eyes. 1, 2, 3. I counted. But all I could see behind my eyelids was Elena's face, and the terrifying realization that I would burn down the whole world just to keep that look in her eyes.
Chapter 6. Elena death does not announce itself with a trumpet or a bang. It creeps in like a fog, settling into the corners of a room until the air becomes too heavy to breathe. I woke up to the sound of a scream. It wasn't a loud scream. It was a thin, high-pitched wail that sounded more like an animal in a trap than a human being. It sliced through the silence of the guest suite and pulled me out of a dreamless sleep. I was out of bed before my eyes were fully open. Nurse instinct took over. Feet on the floor. Adrenaline dumping into my blood. I grabbed my stethoscope from the nightstand and ran into the hallway. The screaming was coming from the master suite. I sprinted down the long, dark corridor. The shadows of the portraits on the walls seemed to stretch and twist, reaching for me. The house felt huge and terrifyingly empty at 3 a.m. I burst through the double doors of Katya's room. The scene froze me for a split second. The lamp on the bedside table was on, casting a harsh yellow light over the bed. Katya was thrashing against the sheets, her body arched in agony. Her skin was gray, slick with sweat. Her eyes were wide and unseeing, fixed on some horror only she could see. But she wasn't alone. Nikolai was there. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, still wearing the white dress shirt from earlier, though it was wrinkled now and unbuttoned at the throat. He had gathered Katya into his arms, pinning her flailing limbs against his chest to keep her from hurting herself. Shh, Katya, I have you. You are safe. His voice was a low rumble, steady and calm in the chaos. It hurts, she shrieked, her voice cracking. Make it stop. Nikolai, please. I moved then. I ran to the other side of the bed, my hands flying to the medication pump on the nightstand. What happened? I asked, my voice tight. Nikolai looked up at me. His eyes were wild, rimmed with red, but his hands remained gentle on his wife's back. She woke up like this, he said, the breakthrough pain. It is bad tonight, Elena. I checked the pump. She had maxed out her lockout dose. The morphine wasn't cutting it anymore. The cancer was eating through her nerves, and the drugs were just water against a forest fire. I need the emergency kit, I said, grabbing the locked box from the dresser. I keyed in the code with shaking fingers. I pulled out a vial of Dilaudid and a fresh syringe. "Hold her still," I ordered. Nikolai nodded. He shifted his grip, wrapping one large hand around Katya's upper arm and pressing her head against his shoulder. He murmured something in Russian against her hair, a soft, rhythmic chant that seemed to ground her, even if only for a second. "I am sorry, Katya," I whispered. "This will pinch." I found a vein in her fragile arm and pushed the plunger. We waited. The longest 10 seconds of my life. Slowly, the tension began to drain out of her body. Her back unarched. The screaming turned into jagged, wet sobs. Then finally, silence. Her eyes fluttered closed, and she slumped heavily against Nikolai's chest. He didn't let go. He sat there, holding his dying wife, rocking her slightly back and forth. He stared at the wall, his jaw set so hard I thought his teeth might shatter. I stepped back, my hands trembling as I capped the needle. I watched them. The monster, the Pakhan, the man who scared grown men with a look. And here he was, wiping sweat from Katya's forehead with a tenderness that made my chest ache. "Is she out?" he asked quietly, not looking at me. "Yes," I said. "That dose should hold her for 4 hours." He nodded. He carefully laid her back against the pillows, arranging the duvet over her skeletal frame. He brushed a strand of damp hair away from her face, his fingers lingering on her cheek for a moment. It wasn't the touch of a lover. It was the touch of a man saying goodbye. He stood up. He looked exhausted. The lines around his mouth were deep grooves of fatigue. "Thank you, Elena," he said. He walked past me, heading for the balcony doors. I should have gone back to bed. I should have checked on Sasha. I should have done a million things that didn't involve following Nikolai Volkov into the dark. But I couldn't leave him alone. Not after that. I checked Katya's vitals one last time, then followed him. The night air hit me like a slap. It was cold, carrying the salt tang of the ocean. Nikolai was standing at the stone railing, looking out at the black water. He had lit a cigarette, the cherry glowing bright in the darkness. He didn't turn around when I stepped out. "You should get some sleep," he said. "I'm not tired." Liar. He took a long drag, exhaling a plume of smoke that was snatched away by the wind. I walked over to him, leaning against the railing a few feet away. I wrapped my arms around myself to ward off the chill. "You were good with her," I said softly. He huffed a dark, humorless laugh. "Good?" "She was screaming in agony, Elena. I didn't do anything. I just held her while she suffered. That is doing something. Most men would have run away. Most men couldn't handle seeing that." "I am not most men," he said. "I am the reason she is suffering." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" "You didn't give her cancer, Nikolai." "No. But I gave her a life that made her miserable enough to welcome it." He turned to face me then. The moonlight washed out the color from his face, making him look like a marble statue. "I found her phone," he said. I froze. "The burner?" He nodded. "She cheated on me, Elena. 2 months ago. Emotional. Text messages to some guy from her past. Oh, Nikolai." "Don't pity me," he snapped. "That is not why I am telling you. I don't care about the infidelity. I care about why." She wrote to him that she was scared. She wrote that she was lonely. She wrote that she couldn't tell me about the diagnosis because I hated her. He took another drag, his hand shaking slightly. She was dying, and she felt she had to tell a stranger because her husband was a wall of ice. He flicked the cigarette over the railing. It tumbled down into the dark garden below. "I hate her for it," he whispered. The confession tore out of him. I hate that she betrayed me. I hate that she sought comfort somewhere else. But mostly I hate myself. Because she was right. If she had told me 2 months ago, I would have been relieved. "Nikolai, it is the truth," he yelled, his voice cracking. He slammed his hands against the stone railing. If she had told me, I would have thought about the alliance. I would have thought about the freedom. I would have thought about us, Elena, about the napkin in the safe. I would have been planning my future while she was planning her funeral. He collapsed forward, burying his face in his hands. His broad shoulders shook. What kind of man does that make me? He choked out. What kind of monster looks at his dying wife and feels impatient? He was breaking. The steel facade he wore for the world, for Ivan, for his soldiers. It was shattering right in front of me. I didn't think. I moved. I stepped into his space and wrapped my arms around him. He stiffened at first, his muscles locking up. But then, with a ragged exhale, he slumped into me. He buried his face in the crook of my neck, his arms coming up to crush me against him. He was heavy. He was shaking. He smelled of smoke and despair. "You are not a monster," I whispered, running my hand up the back of his neck, tangling my fingers in his hair. "You are human. You are in an impossible situation, Nikolai. You are grieving a marriage that was dead long before she got sick. It hurts," he gasped against my skin. "The guilt. It eats me alive. Every time I look at her, I feel like I am killing her. Every time I look at you, I feel like I am cheating on her corpse." I held him tighter. I let him bleed out the pain he had been carrying for 5 years. We stood there for a long time. The wind whipped my hair around our faces. The ocean roared below us. It wasn't sexual. There was no lust in the way he held me. It was desperate. It was two people clinging to each other in the middle of a hurricane. He pulled back eventually. His eyes were dry, but they looked raw. He looked at me. Really looked at me. With a mixture of awe and sadness. "You should run, Elena," he said hoarsely. "You should get in your car and drive until you run out of road. I am going to destroy you." I reached up and cupped his face. My thumb brushed over the rough stubble on his jaw. "You tried to push me away once, Nikolai. It didn't work." He closed his eyes and leaned into my touch. "I am not going anywhere," I promised. He opened his eyes. They were dark and bottomless. "Then God help you," he whispered. He stepped back, breaking the contact. The loss of his heat was immediate and painful. "Go to bed, Elena. Before I do something we will both regret." I wanted to argue. I wanted to pull him back. But I saw the set of his jaw. He had reached his limit. He needed to rebuild his walls before the sun came up. I nodded. "Good night, Nikolai." I walked back into the room. I paused at the foot of the bed. Katya was sleeping peacefully now, her chest rising and falling in a slow rhythm. I looked back at the balcony. Nikolai was lighting another cigarette, staring out at the ocean. A lone figure in the dark, guarding a castle that was crumbling around him. I went back to my room, but I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark, feeling the phantom weight of his arms around me, and I prayed. I prayed for Katya. I prayed for Sasha. And I prayed that when this was all over, there would be enough of Nikolai left to save.
Chapter 7. Nikolai. I hate tuxedos. They are not clothes. They are straitjackets made of silk and societal expectations. I stood in front of the mirror in the master suite, adjusting my bow tie. My hands were steady, but my reflection looked like a man on the edge of a cliff. Behind me, the room was dim, filled with the soft, rhythmic hiss of the oxygen machine. Katya was awake. She was propped up against a mountain of pillows, looking frail and translucent, like a pressed flower that would crumble if you touched it too hard. "You look handsome," she whispered. Her voice was thin, barely audible over the machine. I turned around. "I look like a penguin who is about to commit a felony," she smiled, a weak ghost of a smile. "It is the annual Children's Hospital Gala, Nikolai. You are the primary donor. You have to look like a benevolent king, not a mob boss. I walked over to the bed. I sat on the edge, careful not to disturb the tubes and wires that were currently keeping my wife tethered to this earth. I should not go, I said. I should stay here. We had this argument 3 times today. You have to go, she insisted. Ivan says the rumors are starting. People are saying the Volkov empire is weak because nobody has seen us in public for months. You need to show your face. You need to remind them who owns this city. Ivan, I spat. The name tasted like bile. Ivan is the one who insisted on handling the logistics. He changed the route to the venue 20 minutes ago. Security reasons, he claims. He is paranoid. He is cautious, Katya corrected. And since I cannot walk to the bathroom without help, let alone walk a red carpet, you need a partner. I don't need a partner. I can stand alone. No. A king without a queen looks lonely. A lonely king looks vulnerable. She reached out, her hand trembling as she pointed to the door. Elena is waiting. I stiffened. Elena, the idea of taking Elena into the viper pit of New York high society was madness. It was dangerous. It was putting a target on her back. She is not your queen, Katya, I said quietly. She is a nurse. She does not belong in that world. She is my representative, Katya said firmly. She is reading the speech I cannot read. She is accepting the flowers I cannot hold. It is perfect, Nikolai. It is professional. It was not professional. It was torture. I looked at my wife. I saw the pleading in her eyes. She wanted this. She wanted her best friend to have a night of glamour. She wanted me to have a night away from the smell of sickness. She was trying to give us a gift, even as she lay dying. Fine, I rasped. But if anyone looks at her wrong, I am leaving. Katya closed her eyes. Go, have fun. Pretend, just for tonight, that your life isn't a tragedy. I kissed her forehead. It was cool and dry. I walked out of the room, my heart heavy in my chest. I went down the grand staircase, buttoning my jacket. Ivan's new security team was waiting in the foyer. They were big, silent men who looked more like mercenaries than bodyguards. Sergei, my personal driver for the last 5 years, was waiting by the front door, holding his cap in his hands. He looked nervous. Mr. Volkov, Sergei said, the car is ready. Good. Let's get this over with. Then I heard the click of heels on marble. I looked up. The breath left my lungs in a rush, like I had been punched in the solar plexus. Elena was standing at the top of the stairs. She wasn't wearing scrubs. She wasn't wearing the jeans and t-shirt she wore in the garden. She was wearing a weapon. The dress was black velvet, floor length, with a slit that went up to her thigh. It hugged every curve of her body, showcasing a silhouette that I had only dreamed about for 5 years. The neckline was a deep V that was tasteful but devastating. Her hair was swept up in some complicated twist that exposed the long, elegant line of her neck. She wore diamond drop earrings that caught the light of the chandelier. She looked expensive. She looked dangerous. She looked like she belonged on a throne. She walked down the stairs, her hand trailing lightly on the banister. She moved with a natural grace, but I could see the tension in her jaw. She was terrified. She reached the bottom step and stopped in front of me. She smoothed her hands over the velvet fabric, looking unsure. Katya made me wear it, she said, her voice a little breathless. She ordered it online 3 weeks ago. She said it was for her, but, well, we are not exactly the same size right now. I couldn't speak. I just stared at her. My brain was offline. All I could process was the scent of her. Jasmine and vanilla, and the way the black velvet made her skin look like cream. "You hate it," she said, her shoulders slumping slightly. "I knew it. It is too much. I look like I am playing dress-up." "No," I said. The word came out rough, like gravel. I cleared my throat. "No, Elena. You do not look like you are playing dress-up. You look—" I stopped myself. I couldn't say what I wanted to say. I couldn't say she looked like my future. I couldn't say she looked like the only thing worth dying for in this miserable world. "You look adequate," I lied. She rolled her eyes. A flash of the girl from the alley. "Adequate. You really know how to charm a girl, Volkov." I offered her my arm. "Shall we go? We are on a tight schedule. Ivan changed the route, so the drive will be longer." She took my arm. Her hand was warm through the fabric of my jacket. The contact sent a jolt of electricity straight up my shoulder. "Let's go," she said, "before I trip and break my neck in these heels." The drive to the city was tense. We sat on opposite sides of the limo, a vast expanse of leather seat between us. Sergei drove smoothly, navigating the winding roads out of the Hamptons. I checked my phone. Messages from Ivan. "Are you en route? The Italians are already there. Make sure the girl sticks to the script." I turned off the phone. The gala was held at the Met. The museum was lit up like a beacon in the night. Red carpet, paparazzi, a sea of flashing lights that blinded you if you looked directly at them. We stepped out of the car. The noise was immediate. Shouting photographers, the roar of the city. I felt Elena stiffen beside me. She gripped my arm tighter. "Just keep walking," I murmured, leaning down to her ear. "Don't look at the cameras. Look at me." She looked up at me. Her eyes were wide, reflecting the flashbulbs. "They are like sharks," she whispered. "Yes, but I am the biggest shark in the tank. Stay close to me and they won't bite." We walked the gauntlet. I put my hand on the small of her back, guiding her. It was a possessive gesture, one I couldn't stop myself from making. I felt the heat of her skin through the velvet. I wanted to burn the world down just to keep her safe. Inside, it was a different kind of war zone. Champagne flutes, polite laughter. Men in suits who would stab you in the back for a percentage point. I introduced Elena as Mrs. Volkov's representative. People smiled. They offered fake sympathies for Katya's illness, their eyes scanning Elena, judging her, wondering if she was the mistress. I stared them down. One by one, I dared them to say a word. They didn't. We made it through the speeches. Elena went up to the podium. She was shaking, but her voice was strong. She read Katya's words about hope and resilience. She looked angelic. I stood in the shadows, watching her, and I felt a swell of pride that had no right to exist. Then the music started, a live orchestra playing a waltz. "We should go," I said, appearing at her elbow the second she stepped off the stage. "One dance," she said. She looked flushed, high on the adrenaline of public speaking. "Elena, please, Nikolai. I did the speech. I faced the sharks. I want one dance before we go back to the mausoleum." I should have said no. It was risky. It was intimate. But she looked up at me with those brown eyes, and I was a weak man. One dance. I led her to the floor. I pulled her into my arms. It was a mistake. I knew it the second our bodies touched. Her hand rested on my shoulder. My hand settled on her waist, pulling her flush against me. We moved together. It was effortless, like we had been dancing together for years. The room faded away. The people, the gossip, the danger, it all dissolved. There was just her. "You are trembling," I murmured, tightening my grip. "It is the adrenaline," she whispered. Or maybe it is you. I looked down at her. Her face was tilted up to mine. Her lips were parted slightly. They were painted a deep berry red. I remember, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Remember what? 5 years ago, in the alley. You were wearing cherry lip gloss. Her breath hitched. You remember that? I remember everything, Elena. I remember how you tasted. I remember the sound you made when I pinned you against the wall. I remember how you felt in my arms. She stopped breathing, her eyes darkened, the pupils blowing wide. Nikolai. I haven't been able to taste anything else since, I confessed. It was a reckless thing to say, a dangerous thing. But with her in my arms, surrounded by enemies, I didn't care. She leaned in closer. Her head rested against my chest, right over my heart. Me neither, she whispered. The music ended. We stopped moving. We stood there in the center of the floor, clinging to each other, oblivious to the applause. I wanted to kiss her. I wanted to drag her out of here and take her back to the hotel. But I was the Pakhan, and she was under my protection. Let's go, I rasped, pulling away before I lost control completely. We walked out to the waiting limo. Sergei opened the door. We slid into the back. The door shut, sealing us in the quiet dark. The tension from the dance floor came with us. It filled the car, thick and suffocating. I loosened my tie. I poured a whiskey from the limo's bar just to have something to do with my hands. Elena was watching me. That was intense, she said softly. I downed the drink. It was necessary. Why did you say that? She asked. About the lip gloss? Because it is the truth. She shifted on the seat, moving closer. The velvet of her dress whispered against the leather. I kept the napkin too, she said. I looked at her. What? I didn't put it back in the safe, Nikolai. I kept it. It is in my pocket right now. I groaned. Why do you make this so hard, Elena? Because you are worth fighting for, even if you think you aren't. She reached out and placed her hand on my knee. That touch shattered my resolve. I grabbed her hand. I pulled her across the seat until she was straddling my lap. It was frantic, desperate. Nikolai, she gasped, but she didn't pull away. Her hands tangled in my hair. I buried my face in her neck, inhaling her scent. I kissed the sensitive spot behind her ear. This is wrong, I muttered against her skin. It feels right, she whispered. I moved my hands to her waist, gripping her tight. I was about to kiss her. I was about to cross the line I had drawn in the sand. The car swerved violently. We were thrown to the side. Elena screamed. I slammed against the door, keeping my arms around her to cushion the impact. Sergei! I roared. Brakes! Sergei yelled from the front. He was fighting the wheel. The limo skidded. Rubber screamed against asphalt. Then came the sound. Pop, 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 gunshots! Get down! I shoved Elena to the floor of the limo, covering her body with mine. The car lurched sickeningly as the tires blew out. We were spinning. The world was a blur of motion and noise. We slammed into something hard. A ditch, a guardrail. The impact rattled my teeth. Silence for 1 second. Then another volley of gunfire. Glass shattered. I looked up. Through the spider-webbed window, I saw headlights. A black sedan had boxed us in. Men were getting out. They held rifles. They weren't coming to the doors. They were shooting at the engine block. They were shooting at the tires. This wasn't a hit. They weren't trying to kill us. If they wanted us dead, they would have sprayed the passenger compartment. They were trapping us. Ivan. Fear tactic. He wanted me scared. He wanted me to run back to him begging for the Italian alliance. Rage, hot and white, flooded my veins. "Stay down," I ordered Elena. I reached under the seat and pulled out the Glock I had taped there. "Nikolai?" she whimpered. She was shaking. I looked at her. Her beautiful dress was ruined. Her hair was coming loose. She looked terrified. And just like that, the Pakan was back. "I'm going to get us out of here," I promised. I kicked the door open and rolled out into the night, raising my weapon. The dance was over. The war had begun.
Chapter 8. Elena. The world ended in a screech of metal and the smell of burnt rubber. For a long time, there was only the ringing in my ears. A high-pitched, screaming whine that drowned out everything else. I was pressed into the floor of the limo, the leather smelling of dust and Nikolai's cologne. His weight was heavy on top of me, a solid, warm shield against the chaos. "Elena?" His voice felt like a vibration against my spine before I actually heard it. "Elena, can you hear me?" I tried to nod, but my head was spinning. I pushed myself up, coughing as the dust from the deployed airbags settled in the cramped space. The limo was tilted at a sickening angle, the front end smashed into the guardrail. "I am okay," I wheezed. "I think." Nikolai shifted, moving off me with a grunt of effort. He didn't look at me. He looked toward the front of the car, where the partition glass was shattered. "Sergei." He said the name quietly, but the tone made my blood run cold. He crawled forward, glass crunching under his knees. I followed his gaze. The driver's side was crushed. Sergei was slumped over the wheel. I didn't need to check for a pulse to know he was gone. The angle of his neck was wrong. Unnatural. I clamped a hand over my mouth to stop the scream building in my throat. He had been holding his cap in his hands just an hour ago. He had looked nervous. Now he was just gone. Collateral damage in a war I didn't understand. Nikolai stared at him for a second. His face was a mask of stone, but I saw his hand clench around the grip of his gun until his knuckles turned white. "We have to move," he said. He turned back to me, his eyes dark and urgent. "They are gone, but the police will be here in minutes. We cannot be here when they arrive." He kicked the door open. It groaned in protest, metal shearing against metal, before swinging wide into the night. The cold air hit me like a slap. Nikolai grabbed my hand and pulled me out. My legs felt like jelly. I stumbled, my high heel catching on a root, and pain shot up my ankle. A sharp, hot spike that made me gasp. I kicked off the shoes. I didn't care about the designer velvet or the diamonds. I just wanted to survive. Nikolai was already typing on his phone. His fingers flew across the screen, calm and precise, as if he were sending a business email and not standing next to a wreck with a dead body inside. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Clean up," he said. "My team will be here in 5 minutes to handle Sergei and the car. No police. No press." He shoved the phone into his pocket and looked at the woods stretching out black and ominous beside the road. "We walk." He grabbed my hand again. We scrambled down the embankment, away from the road, away from the wreckage. The ground was uneven, covered in wet leaves and thorns that tore at my dress. We hadn't gone 10 feet when my ankle gave out. I crumbled, a cry of pain tearing from my throat. Nikolai stopped instantly. He was there, catching me before I hit the ground. "You are hurt." "It is just a twist," I lied, gritting my teeth. "I can walk." I tried to put weight on it. My leg buckled. He didn't say a word. He just scooped me up into his arms like I weighed nothing. "Nikolai, put me down. You can't carry me. Be quiet, Elena." He started moving again, deeper into the woods. He didn't just walk. He moved with a terrifying purpose. He avoided the obvious paths. He stepped over logs instead of on them. At one point, he waded into a shallow, freezing stream. "What are you doing?" I whispered, shivering as the cold water soaked the hem of my ruined dress. "Counter-tracking," he murmured. "If Ivan sent a second team to sweep the woods, they will look for footprints. Water hides the trail. We double back here." I looked at him. His tuxedo was torn. There was a smear of grease on his cheek. He looked wild and dangerous, a creature of the dark rather than the boardroom. This was the man who had survived a car bomb at 22. This was the soldier. We walked for what felt like hours. The adrenaline was starting to fade, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion and the throbbing ache in my ankle. Finally, a shape loomed out of the darkness. A small wooden structure half buried in vines. "Hunting cabin?" Nikolai said, kicking the door open. "It belonged to my grandfather. Nobody has used it in 20 years. He carried me inside. It smelled of dust and dry wood." He set me down on a dusty workbench and turned to lock the door, engaging a rusty deadbolt that groaned in the silence. "We are safe," he said, "for tonight." He turned to face me. The moon was shining through the dirty window, illuminating the space. He looked wrecked. His hair was wild, his chest heaving as he caught his breath. He stepped toward me, his hands reaching out. "Let me see your ankle." I swatted his hands away. "No." He froze, looking confused. "Elena, you are hurt. I am the nurse," I snapped. My voice was shrill, bordering on hysterical. I pushed myself off the bench, hopping on one foot. "Sit down, Nikolai." He blinked. "What?" "Sit down." I shoved him toward a rickety wooden chair in the corner. He sat, looking bewildered. I limped over to him. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clear. This I could do. I couldn't fight gunmen. I couldn't navigate mafia politics. But I could triage a patient. I grabbed his face between my hands. "Look at me." He stared at me, his pupils blown wide. "Follow my finger," I ordered. I moved my finger back and forth. His eyes tracked it perfectly. No concussion. Good. I moved my hands down to his chest. His shirt was torn, buttons missing. I pressed my palms against his ribs, feeling the heat of his skin, the frantic beat of his heart. Deep breath. He inhaled. He didn't wince. "Ribs are okay," I muttered. I checked his arms. Scratches, bruises, but no bullet holes, no arterial bleeding. I stepped back, the adrenaline crash hitting me all at once. My knees shook. "You are okay," I whispered. "You are intact." He watched me, his expression shifting from confusion to something else, something hot and dark. "I am fine, Elena," he rasped. "Check your ankle." I looked down. My ankle was swollen, angry, and red. It throbbed in time with my heartbeat. "I need a splint," I said, "and a bandage." I looked around the empty cabin. There was nothing. I looked at Nikolai. "Give me your shirt." He raised an eyebrow. "My shirt? It is linen. It will tear easily. Give it to me." He stood up. He didn't argue. He stripped off his jacket, tossing it onto the dusty floor. Then he unbuttoned what was left of his shirt. He pulled it off, revealing an expanse of muscle and skin that made my mouth go dry. He handed it to me. I sat back on the workbench. I ripped the expensive fabric into strips. The sound was loud in the quiet cabin. I wrapped my ankle tight. It hurt, but the pressure felt good. Grounding. "There," I said, tying off the knot. I looked up. Nikolai was standing right in front of me. He was shirtless. He was dirty. He was beautiful. He reached out and touched my cheek. His fingers were rough, but his touch was gentle. "You are amazing," he whispered. I let out a shaky breath. "I am terrified. I know. I almost died tonight, Nikolai. We almost died, but we didn't." He stepped closer. His legs bumped against my knees, parting them. He stepped into the space between my legs, his hands sliding around to grip my waist. "I need you to know something," he said, his voice dropping to a growl. "When that car hit the rail, when the bullets started flying. I didn't think about the Empire. I didn't think about my legacy. He leaned down, his forehead resting against mine. I only thought about you. I only thought that if you died, I would burn the world until there was nothing left but ash. The confession hung in the air, heavy and intoxicating. The fear that had been gripping me for the last 2 hours shifted. It curdled in my stomach and turned into heat. It turned into a desperate, clawing need to feel something other than terror. To feel alive. "Nikolai," I breathed. He didn't wait. He crashed his mouth down on mine. It wasn't like the kiss in the alley. That had been a question. This was an answer. It was fierce. It was messy. It tasted of blood and dust and desperation. I wrapped my arms around his neck, pulling him closer, needing to feel the solid weight of him against me. He groaned, a low, guttural sound that vibrated against my lips. His hands roamed over my body, gripping the velvet of my dress, tracing the curve of my spine. He lifted me up, pressing me back against the dusty workbench. I didn't care about the dirt. I didn't care about the danger. I only cared about him. "I hate this dress," he growled against my neck, his teeth grazing the sensitive skin there. "Rip it," I said. He pulled back to look at me, his eyes wild. "Buy me a new one," I challenged. He smirked. A dangerous, wicked thing. "Done." He grabbed the neckline of the velvet dress and pulled. The fabric tore with a satisfying sound. The cool air hit my skin, followed immediately by the heat of his hands. It was frantic. It was inevitable. It was 5 years of silence and longing exploding all at once in a dirty hunting cabin. When he finally pushed inside me, I cried out. Not from pain, but from the sheer relief of it. He filled the empty spaces in my soul. He anchored me to the earth when I felt like I was floating away. "Elena," he gasped, his forehead resting against my shoulder. "My Elena." We moved together in the dark, a rhythm as old as time. It was a reclaiming. It was a promise. Later, we lay tangled together on the floor, covered by his suit jacket and the remnants of my dress. The dust motes danced in the moonlight. I rested my head on his chest, listening to his heart slow down. "We are in so much trouble," I whispered. He tightened his arm around me. "Let tomorrow worry about tomorrow," he said. "Tonight, we are just us." I closed my eyes. The floor was hard. My ankle throbbed. I was cold. But I had never felt safer in my life.
Chapter 9. Nikolai sunlight is a liar. It makes the world look clean when it is anything but. I woke up to the sound of birds chirping and the smell of dust suspended in a shaft of morning light. For a split second, the heavy weight on my chest felt like peace. Elena was asleep, her head resting over my heart. Her dark hair splayed across my bare skin like ink. Then the memories of last night hit me like a sledgehammer. The crash, the gunfire, the dead driver, the cabin, and this. I looked down at her. She looked soft in the morning light, her eyelashes resting against her cheek, her lips slightly parted. She looked like something precious that I had just broken. I closed my eyes, fighting the urge to scream. I had broken every rule. I had shattered every code. I was the Pakhan. I was a married man. I was a target. And I had just dragged the only innocent thing in my life into the mud with me. The guilt wasn't a wave. It was a riptide. It pulled me under, filling my lungs with water. I carefully shifted, sliding out from under her. She murmured something in her sleep, reaching for me, but I pulled away. I couldn't let her touch me. Not now. I felt dirty. I felt like the blood on my hands was contagious. I stood up and pulled on my ruined trousers. I found my shirt on the floor, torn into strips. I looked at the makeshift bandage on Elena's ankle. It was tight, professional. She saved me, I thought, and I repaid her by making her an accomplice. I put on my suit jacket over my bare chest, buttoning it to hide as much skin as possible. It scratched, uncomfortable and wrong. "We have to go," I said, my voice rough with sleep and regret. Elena stirred. She blinked open her eyes, squinting against the light. A slow smile spread across her face when she saw me. It was a beautiful, sleepy, intimate smile. "Nikolai?" she whispered. "Get up, Elena. We need to move." The sharpness of my tone made her flinch. The smile vanished. She sat up, clutching my tuxedo shirt, or what was left of it, to her chest. "What is wrong?" "Everything," I said. "Get dressed." I turned my back on her. I couldn't watch her scramble into her torn dress. I couldn't watch the confusion cloud her eyes. I walked to the door and looked out. The woods were quiet. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from my head of security. Site cleared. Vehicle and asset removed. Police scanners silent. Coast is clear for return to base. They had cleaned up the mess. Sergei was gone. The car was gone. As if nothing had happened. Just like I needed to make last night disappear. Elena limped up behind me. "I am ready." I turned. She looked disheveled, her dress ruined, her hair a mess. She looked like a survivor. I didn't offer to carry her this time. I couldn't touch her. If I touched her, I wouldn't be able to do what I had to do. "Can you walk?" I asked. She nodded, though I saw the wince of pain as she put weight on her splinted ankle. "Yes. Let's go." The walk back to the estate was silent. We stuck to the tree line, avoiding the main road. Every step took us further away from the cabin and closer to reality. When the house came into view, my stomach turned. It was swarming. Black SUVs lined the driveway. Men with earpieces patrolled the perimeter. It looked like a fortress preparing for a siege. We walked out of the woods and onto the back lawn. "Nikolai!" The voice boomed across the grass. Uncle Ivan. He was standing on the patio, holding a tumbler of amber liquid. He rushed toward us, his face a mask of concern that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Thank God," he said, stopping in front of us. "We heard about the crash. The cleanup crew said you were missing. I was about to send a search party." He looked me over, taking in the missing shirt, the dirt, the exhaustion. Then his eyes slid to Elena. He noted the limp, the torn dress, the way she stood close to me. His lip curled slightly, just for a second, before he smoothed his expression back into the worried patriarch. "Are you injured?" he asked. "Minor cuts," I said. "Sergei is dead." "A tragedy," Ivan sighed. "He was a good driver, loyal. But these things happen in war, nephew. This wasn't war, Ivan. This was a setup." Ivan shook his head, looking grave. It was a warning. "My sources tell me the Italians are getting bold. They know we are vulnerable. They know Katya is declining. They struck at you to show they could." He took a sip of his drink, watching me closely. "This is why we need allies, Nikolai. Strong allies. If the marriage contract with the Don's daughter was signed, they wouldn't dare touch you." I stared at him. My driver was dead. My wife was dying upstairs, and he was pitching the alliance before the body was even cold. "Not now, Ivan," I growled. He held up his hands in surrender. "Of course, you are in shock. Go inside, get cleaned up. The doctor is checking on Katya. She was distressed when you didn't come home." He looked at Elena again. "And perhaps Miss Rossi should be taken home? She looks like she has had enough of our world for one lifetime." He was right. I looked at Elena. She was watching me, waiting. waiting for me to tell him to back off, waiting for me to claim her like I had in the cabin. I hardened my heart. I built the wall brick by brick. Yes, I said flatly. Have one of the guards drive her back to the city. Elena stiffened. What? You heard him, I said, not meeting her eyes. You should go. Nikolai, she whispered. We need to talk. There is nothing to talk about. She stepped closer, ignoring Ivan, ignoring the guards. She reached out and touched my arm. The contact burned. Last night, she started. Last night was a mistake, I interrupted. My voice was cold, lethal. It was the voice I used to order executions. She recoiled as if I had slapped her. A mistake? She choked out. I looked at her then. I forced myself to look at the hurt in her eyes, at the way her chin trembled. I had to do this. If she stayed, Ivan would use her. If she stayed, she would be a target. If she stayed, I would destroy her. It was adrenaline, Elena. It was stress. We almost died, and we reacted. That is all it was. She shook her head slowly. You don't mean that. I do. I am a married man. My wife is dying upstairs. Do you think I am proud of what happened in that cabin? Do you think it meant anything to me other than a moment of weakness? I saw the light go out in her eyes. I saw the exact moment her heart broke. It killed me. I felt my own soul crack down the middle, but I kept my face blank. Go home, Elena, I said. Go back to your life. Forget you ever met me. She stared at me for a long moment. Then slowly, she stepped back. She pulled her hand away from my arm. She straightened her spine, despite the pain in her ankle. She pulled the shreds of her dignity around her like armor. You are a coward, Nikolai, she whispered, and you are a liar. She turned to Ivan. I don't need a ride. I have my car. She limped toward the driveway. She didn't look back. I watched her go. I watched the only good thing in my life walk away because I was too toxic to keep her. Well, Ivan said, taking a sip of his drink. That was messy, but necessary. I turned on him. I wanted to tear his throat out. I wanted to scream. Instead, I buttoned my jacket. I'm going to see my wife, I said. I walked into the house, leaving the sunlight behind. I walked back into the cage, and this time, I locked the door myself.
Chapter 10. Elena. I made it as far as the front gate. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so hard the leather creaked. My foot was hovering over the gas pedal. The engine of my beat-up Civic was idling, a rough, sputtering sound that felt pathetic compared to the purr of the black SUVs lining the driveway. I was leaving. I was actually leaving. Nikolai's words were still ringing in my ears, sharp and precise as a scalpel. A mistake. A moment of weakness. Go back to your life. He had gutted me. He had taken the most beautiful, terrifying night of my life and reduced it to a stress reaction. He had looked me in the eye and told me I was nothing but collateral damage. I should go. I should drive back to Queens, call my supervisor, beg for my shift back, and pretend the last week never happened. I should forget the way he smelled like rain and whiskey. I should forget the way he looked at me in that cabin, like I was the only air in the room. I shifted the car into drive. Then I looked up at the house. It was a fortress of gray stone against a gray sky. But on the second floor, the curtains of the master suite were drawn. Behind those curtains, Katya was dying. Katya, who had shared her dorm food with me when I was broke. Katya, who had laughed at my terrible jokes. Katya, who was terrified and alone in a house full of men who saw her as a liability. If I left now, she would die alone. She would die with only Nikolai, who was drowning in his own guilt. Or worse, Ivan, hovering over her like a vulture. I slammed the car into park. I am not a coward, I whispered to the empty car. And I am not a liar. I turned off the engine. I grabbed my bag. I marched back up the driveway. The guards at the front door stepped forward to block me. They were new faces, part of Yvonne's detail. "Mr. Volkov said you were leaving," one of them grunted, his hand resting on his belt. I didn't stop. I didn't flinch. I walked right up to him until I was in his personal space. "Mr. Volkov is an idiot," I snapped. "My patient is in critical condition. Unless you want to explain to the Pakan why his wife died in pain because you wouldn't let the nurse in, I suggest you move." He hesitated. He looked at his partner. They were hired guns, used to dealing with threats, not angry women in torn velvet dresses. "Step aside," I ordered. They moved. I walked back into the foyer. I didn't look for Nikolai. I didn't look for Ivan. I walked straight up the grand staircase, my heels clicking a rhythm of defiance on the marble. I went directly to the master suite. The room was quiet. The only sound was the rhythmic whoosh hiss of the oxygen concentrator. The air smelled of lavender and antiseptic, the scent of terminal illness. Nikolai wasn't there. I felt a flash of anger, followed immediately by relief. I couldn't look at him right now. If I looked at him, I might scream or cry or slap him. And I didn't have the energy for any of that. I walked to the bed. Katya was awake. Barely. Her eyes were open, but they were unfocused, staring at the ceiling. Her breathing was shallow, a wet, rattling sound in her chest that every nurse knows. The death rattle. It wasn't scary, not really. It just meant the lungs were too tired to clear the fluid. It meant the end was hours, not days, away. I pulled the chair up to the bedside. I took her hand. It was cold, the skin paper thin. "Kat," I whispered, "I'm here." Her head rolled slowly on the pillow. Her eyes found mine. It took a long moment for her to register who I was. Then a faint spark of recognition lit up her gaze. "Elle," she breathed. "You came back." "I never left." I lied. I smoothed the hair back from her forehead. She tried to smile, but her muscles were too weak. "Where is Sasha?" "She's with the nanny," I said softly. "She's safe. She's playing." "Good. Don't let her see me like this." "I won't." We sat in silence for a while. I checked the morphine pump. It was running steady. She wasn't in pain anymore. She was floating in that gray space between here and whatever comes next. I thought she had drifted off again, but her fingers suddenly tightened around mine. The grip was surprisingly strong. "Elena, I'm here." "Nikolai," she rasped. My heart stuttered. "I don't know where he is, Kat. He's working." "No." She shook her head, a tiny movement. "Listen to me." I leaned in close, my ear hovering inches from her lips. "I know," she whispered. I froze. "You know what? About you and him?" The blood drained from my face. I started to pull away, panic rising in my throat. I opened my mouth to deny it, to tell her she was hallucinating, to protect her from the truth in her final moments. "Katya, no, Shh," she hissed. "Don't lie. Not now." She opened her eyes fully. They were glassy, but clear. There was no judgment in them. Only a bone-deep weariness and something that looked like peace. "I saw the way he looks at you," she said, her voice thready. "In the garden, at the gala, he looks alive." Tears pricked my eyes. "I am so sorry, Katya. I never meant for it to happen. We tried to stop it, I swear." "Stop," she breathed. "Don't apologize." She took a ragged breath, her chest hitching. "I am tired, Elena. I have been tired for a long time, being his wife. It is a heavy crown. I couldn't carry it." She looked at the ceiling again, her gaze drifting. "He needs light," she whispered. "He is so full of dark. He needs someone who isn't afraid of the shadows. That's you, Elena." I started to cry then, silent, hot tears that tracked down my cheeks. "I can't. I whispered. He pushed me away. He hates himself for it. He doesn't hate you, she said. He hates failing. He thinks loving you is failing me. She squeezed my hand again. Tell him. Tell him I said it's okay. Tell him. I want him to be happy. She coughed, a wet, hacking sound that racked her frail body. I reached for the suction wand, but she waved it away. And Sasha, she gasped, she needs a mother. She looked at me then, her gaze piercing. Promise me, Katya. Promise me, she wheezed. Love her, protect her. Don't let Ivan turn her into a pawn. Be her mother, Elena. I gripped her hand with both of mine. I promise, I swear to you, Kat, I will love her like my own. She exhaled a long, shuddering sigh. The tension left her body. She sank deeper into the pillows. Good, she whispered. That is, good. Her eyes drifted closed. Stay? She asked, her voice barely a breath. I'm staying. I'm right here. I didn't let go of her hand. The afternoon wore on. The light in the room shifted from the harsh gray of midday to the soft golden slant of evening. Nikolai came in once. I heard the door open. I felt his presence like a change in atmospheric pressure. He walked to the foot of the bed. He looked at Katya, then he looked at me. His face was a mask of exhaustion. He looked like he wanted to say something. He looked like he wanted to yell at me for being there or maybe thank me. I didn't look away from Katya. I didn't acknowledge him. I kept my promise to myself. I was here for her, not for him. He stood there for a long time, watching us. Then, without a word, he turned and left. Night fell. The room grew dark, lit only by the glowing numbers of the medical equipment. Katya's breathing changed. The gaps between breaths grew longer. 10 seconds. 20 seconds. I leaned forward. It was time. Katya, I whispered. It's okay. You can go. Sasha is safe. Nikolai is safe. You did good, Kat. You did so good. She didn't answer. She took one breath, a small hitching gasp, and then nothing. I waited. I watched her chest. 1 second, 2, 10, 30. Silence. The machine hummed on, indifferent. The world outside the window continued to turn, but inside this room the struggle was over. I checked for a pulse, knowing I wouldn't find one. Her skin was already cooling. I stood up. My legs were stiff. I reached out and gently closed her eyes. She looked young again. The pain lines were gone. She looked like the girl I had shared a dorm room with, the girl who had dreams of being an artist before the Volkov name swallowed her whole. Goodbye, my friend, I whispered. I turned off the oxygen machine. The silence that followed was deafening. I walked to the door. I opened it. Nikolai was sitting on the floor in the hallway, his back against the wall opposite the door. He had his head in his hands. He looked like a man waiting for the executioner. He looked up when he heard the door. I didn't have to say it. He saw it in my face. He stood up slowly. He looked older than his 27 years. Is it over? He asked, his voice rough. Yes. He nodded once. A sharp, jerky movement. Was she in pain? No. It was peaceful. She just went to sleep. He let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for months. He looked at the open door, but he made no move to go inside. Thank you, he said. It sounded formal, distant. I have a message, I said. He stiffened. What? She spoke to me. Before the end, she told me to tell you something. He looked away, staring down the dark corridor. I don't want to hear it. You need to hear it, Nikolai. I stepped closer to him. I ignored the way he flinched. She told me she knew. He looked back at me, his eyes narrowing. Knew what? About us? About the way you look at me? His face went pale. He looked like I had slapped him. She knew? Yes. And she wasn't angry. She told me to tell you that she wants you to be happy. She said she was tired of the heavy crown. She gave you her blessing, Nikolai." I watched the words hit him. I watched the guilt war with the relief. He shook his head, backing away from me. "No," he whispered. "You are making that up. You are trying to make me feel better. I am not. She made me promise to take care of Sasha. She made me promise to be the mother she couldn't be." He stared at me, his chest heaving. "She released you, Nikolai," I said softly. "You don't have to punish yourself anymore." He let out a harsh, broken laugh. "Released me?" he choked out. "Elena, she just died. Her body is still warm. And you think her permission fixes what I did? You think it erases the fact that I touched you while she was dying? It doesn't erase it, but it forgives it." "I can't forgive it," he roared. The sound echoed off the walls. He scrubbed his hands over his face, looking wild. I need air." He turned and stormed away, heading for the stairs. I watched him go. I wanted to chase him. I wanted to tell him that grief wasn't a straight line, that it was okay to be messy. But I knew he wouldn't hear me. Not tonight. I went back into the room. I pulled the sheet up over Katya's face. I sat in the chair and waited for the sunrise. I had a promise to keep.
Chapter 11. Nikolai. It always rains at Volkov funerals. It is a cliché. It is a bad movie trope. But looking out at the sea of black umbrellas bobbing in the gray mist of the cemetery, I decided the universe simply lacked imagination. The air smelled of wet earth and lilies. I hate lilies. They smell like death dressed up in perfume. I stood at the edge of the open grave. My suit was black. My tie was black. My soul felt like it had been dipped in tar. Sasha was holding my hand. Her grip was tight, her small palm sweating against mine. She was wearing a black dress that looked too big for her, and black patent leather shoes that were already muddy. She didn't fully understand. She knew Mama was gone. She knew Mama was sleeping in the fancy box. But she kept looking around the crowd, as if she expected Katya to step out from behind a tombstone and tell us the game was over. I squeezed her hand. "I am here, Zaichionok. I am not going anywhere." She looked up at me. Her eyes were dry. She had cried herself out 2 days ago. Now she just looked confused and small. The priest was drone on, something about peace, something about angels. I tuned him out. There was no peace here. The cemetery was surrounded by press. Photographers hung over the iron fence like vultures, their lenses zooming in to catch a tear, a grimace, anything they could sell to the tabloids. The mafia prince buries his wife. It was front-page gold. I scanned the crowd. The family was out in full force. Men I hadn't seen in years. Rivals who came to check for weakness. Politicians I owned. Judges I bribed. They all stood there with somber faces, nodding at me, calculating how Katya's death shifted the power dynamic. Then I saw her. Elena. She was standing in the back, far away from the family plot, under the shelter of a large oak tree. She wasn't wearing a designer coat. She wasn't hiding behind oversized sunglasses. She stood tall, her hands clasped in front of her, watching the casket. She looked beautiful. She looked sad. Our eyes met across the wet grass. My chest tightened. I wanted to go to her. I wanted to leave this circus and bury my face in her neck and forget that I was a widower who had wished for this day. "She released you," Elena had said. I didn't feel released. I felt shackled. I felt the weight of my failure pressing down on my shoulders until my knees threatened to buckle. I looked away. I couldn't handle her compassion. Not today. The priest finished. The casket was lowered. The gears of the lift groaned, a mechanical shriek that made Sasha flinch. Dust to dust, the priest muttered. People started to disperse. They came by one to shake my hand. My condolences, Pakan. She was a saint, Nikolai. Let us know if you need anything. Empty words. They didn't care. They were just checking to see if the lion was wounded enough to attack. I nodded. I murmured thanks. I shielded Sasha from the worst of them. Finally, the crowd thinned. The press pack gave up and left to file their stories. I was alone by the grave, or I thought I was. A heavy hand landed on my shoulder. I didn't flinch. I knew the weight of that hand. I knew the smell of the expensive scotch that clung to him even at 10 in the morning. Uncle Ivan. You held up well, nephew, he said. His voice was thick, slurry at the edges. I turned to look at him. Ivan was wearing a suit that cost more than most people made in a decade. He looked flushed. His eyes were bright, too bright for a funeral. He wasn't grieving. He was celebrating. It is done, I said flatly. Yes, it is done. A tragedy, of course. But life moves on. The organization moves on. He stepped closer, invading my personal space. He lowered his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. I spoke to the Don this morning. He sends his sympathies, and he is very eager to set a date for the wedding. I felt a flash of cold rage. My wife is in the ground 5 minutes, Ivan, and the world keeps turning. He chuckled, a wet sound. Do not be naive, Nikolai. Mourning is a luxury we cannot afford. The Italians are waiting. The contract is ready. You need to secure your legacy. He wasn't asking. He was telling. He was looking at me like I was a chess piece he had finally maneuvered into the winning square. I looked at him. Really looked at him. He was drunk on power. He thought I was broken. He thought I was the grieving, guilt-ridden boy he could mold into whatever he wanted. He adjusted his cuff, pulling at the sleeve of his jacket. It was a small movement, insignificant. But the light caught something on his wrist. A watch. Gold. Heavy. A vintage Patek Philippe with a custom engraving on the rim. My breath stopped. The world tilted on its axis. The rain, the cemetery, the noise, it all vanished. There was only that watch. I knew that watch. I had memorized every scratch on it when I was a child. I had sat on my father's lap and listened to the ticking. My father was wearing that watch the night he died. I stared at it. It was pristine. The gold shone. The glass face was flawless. There were no scorch marks, no soot, no signs of the inferno that had turned my parents' car into a twisted heap of metal and melted rubber. If that watch had been in the car, it would be slag. It wasn't. Which meant Ivan hadn't found it in the wreckage. He hadn't recovered it as a keepsake. He had taken it off my father's wrist before the bomb went off. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. It unlocked something in my brain, a memory I had buried under 5 years of trauma and shock. The phone call. Ivan, what is... Nikolai. He had called me seconds after the explosion. Seconds. How did he know? Unless he was watching. Unless he was holding the detonator. My blood turned to ice. My heart slowed to a terrifying, predatory rhythm. The man standing in front of me wasn't my uncle. He wasn't my mentor. He wasn't my family. He was the architect of my entire hell. Ivan saw me staring. He followed my gaze to his wrist. Ah, he said, smiling a greasy smile, a memento. I thought it was fitting to wear it today, to honor his memory as we secure the future he wanted. You found it? I asked. My voice sounded calm. It didn't sound like my voice. It sounded like a stranger's. Yes, in the ashes. A miracle it survived, no. A sign from God. A miracle. I looked up at his face. I saw the arrogance, I saw the lie sitting comfortably in his eyes. He killed them. He killed my mother. He killed my father. He killed the boy I used to be. And now he was trying to sell me like cattle to the Italians to cover his own ambition. I didn't scream. I didn't lunge at him. I smiled. It was a cold, sharp thing, a blade wrapped in skin. Yes, Ivan, I said. A sign. I pulled Sasha closer to my leg. We will talk about the Italians tomorrow, I said. Today I need to take my daughter home. Of course. Take the day. But tomorrow, Nikolai. Tomorrow we build the empire. Tomorrow, I thought, I bury you. I turned away. I walked toward the car where Sergei's replacement was waiting. I didn't look back at the grave. I didn't look back at Ivan. I saw Elena still standing by the tree. She watched me. She saw the change in my walk. She saw the tension in my shoulders. She took a step toward me, but I shook my head slightly. Not yet. I put Sasha in the car. I got in beside her. Drive, I told the new driver. Where to, boss? Home. I have a rat to kill.
Chapter 12. Elena, silence is a sound. It has a weight. It has a texture. In the Volkov estate, silence felt like velvet draped over a cage. Heavy, suffocating, expensive. It had been 3 days since the funeral. 3 days of rain. 3 days of watching Sasha stare out the window, waiting for a father who never came home before dark. 3 days of Nikolai walking past me in the hallway like I was part of the wallpaper. He had shut down. After the funeral, after that moment in the cemetery where I thought he might finally break, he had turned into stone. He retreated into his office. He took meetings with men who arrived in armored cars. He didn't eat. He didn't sleep. And he didn't speak to me. I folded a pair of scrubs and placed them in my duffel bag. The zipper made a harsh, final sound in the quiet guest room. I was leaving. I had to. Katya was gone. The funeral was over. My excuse for being here had evaporated. Now I was just the nanny. The distraction. The mistake he regretted in the morning light. I couldn't stay and watch him destroy himself. I couldn't stay and watch him marry the Italian daughter, which the staff was already whispering about in the kitchen. I had promised Katya I would protect Sasha. But how could I protect a child when I couldn't even look her father in the eye without falling apart? I zipped the bag shut. It sat on the bed, a lumpy, pathetic thing next to the silk duvet. I walked down the hall to the nursery. I needed to say goodbye. Sasha was sitting on the floor, surrounded by a city of wooden blocks. She was building a tower, stacking them higher and higher with a focus that mirrored her father's. "Hi, sweetie," I said, sitting down next to her. She didn't look up. "Is Papa home?" "Not yet. He is always working. He is doing it for you, Sasha, to keep you safe." She knocked the tower over. The blocks clattered against the hardwood floor, a chaotic, angry sound. "I don't want to be safe," she mumbled. "I want him to play hide and seek." My heart broke a little. I reached out and smoothed her dark curls. "I know. Listen, Sasha, I have to go away for a little while." Her head snapped up. Her eyes, so like Nikolai's, widened in panic. "No, you can't go. Mama went away. You can't go too." I pulled her into my lap. She struggled for a second, then collapsed against me, burying her face in my shoulder. "I have to go back to my house," I explained, rocking her gently. "But I will come visit. I promise." "You promise?" "I promise." I held her, breathing in the scent of baby shampoo and innocence. I was lying. I knew I was lying. Nikolai would never let me back in. Once I walked out those gates, the iron curtain would fall. The door to the nursery slammed open. I jumped, clutching Sasha tighter. Nikolai stood in the doorway. He looked wild. His hair was messy, as if he had been running his hands through it for hours. His shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, his tie gone. But it was his eyes that scared me. They weren't dead anymore. They were blazing with a frantic, terrifying energy. He scanned the room, his gaze landing on us. He didn't look relieved. He looked like a man who was out of time. "Get down," he ordered. "What?" I scrambled to my feet, putting Sasha behind me. "Nikolai, you are scaring her. I said get down." He crossed the room in 3 long strides. He grabbed my arm, not gently, and pulled me away from the window. He knelt down, dragging us down with him until we were huddled on the floor behind the toy chest. He reached up and locked the door. "Papa," Sasha whimpered. "Shh, Zaichionok. It is a game. We are playing a game." He looked at me. His chest was heaving. He smelled of sweat and gun oil and that expensive scotch he drank when he couldn't cope. "You are packing," he said. "I saw the duffel bag in the guest room." "I am leaving, Nikolai. You haven't spoken to me in 3 days." "I thought—" "You thought I was ignoring you." "Yes. I wasn't ignoring you. I was remembering." He looked at the door, as if he expected someone to kick it down. Then he looked back at me, his expression raw. "I saw the watch, Elena." I frowned, confused by the sudden shift. "What watch?" "At the funeral. Ivan was wearing it. My father's Patek Philippe, okay? It was pristine. He said the word like it was a curse. It was golden glass, Elena, perfectly clean, not a scratch, not a burn mark." "So?" "So my parents died in a fire that melted the chassis of an SUV," he hissed. "If that watch had been in the car, it would be slag. It would be nothing." The realization hit me slowly, filtering through the fear. "He took it," I whispered. "He took it off my father's wrist before the explosion." Nikolai closed his eyes. His hands were shaking. And then I remembered the phone call. For 5 years, I blocked it out. The shock. It erased the details. But when I saw that watch, it all came back. He opened his eyes. They were wet. He called me seconds after the bomb went off. Seconds, Elena. He was screaming that they were dead before the smoke had even cleared. How did he know? He paused, his jaw working. He couldn't have known. Unless he was watching. Unless he was holding the detonator. I covered my mouth with my hand. "Oh my God." "He killed them," Nikolai said, his voice devoid of emotion now. "He killed them to take the throne, but he needed a puppet. He needed a grieving, traumatized boy he could control until he secured his own power base. That is why he kept me alive. That is why he forced the marriage." He looked at Sasha, who was watching him with wide, terrified eyes. "And now he is done with me. He has the Italians. He has the legacy. I am just a loose end." "We have to leave," I said, grabbing his arm. "We have to call the police. No police. Ivan owns half the precinct. If we leave this house, we are dead. There are men outside the gate. His men. Then what do? We are trapped." Nikolai looked at me. The wildness in his eyes settled into a cold, hard resolve. "I am going to kill him. Nikolai. Tonight. He is coming to the study for a drink. He thinks we are celebrating the Italian contract." He reached out and cupped my face. His thumb brushed my cheekbone. "I need you to trust me, Elena. One last time." I looked at him. I saw the boy from the alley. I saw the man in the cabin. I saw the father protecting his child. "I trust you," I said. He nodded. "Good." He stood up, keeping low. He grabbed a thick wool blanket from the crib. He grabbed a bag of snacks and a water bottle from the changing table. He shoved them into a backpack. He was thinking about Sasha. Even now, in the middle of a war, he was making sure she wouldn't be cold or hungry. "Where are we going?" I asked. "The panic room?" "No." Ivan installed the security system. He has the master codes. The panic room is a coffin. He pulled me to my feet. He picked up Sasha, wrapping her legs around his waist. We are going to the cellar. The wine cellar? Deeper. He led us out of the nursery. The hallway was empty. The house was silent, but now the silence felt predatory. Every shadow looked like a gunman. We moved fast, down the back stairs, through the kitchen. Nikolai moved with a predator's grace, his gun drawn now, held low at his side. We reached the wine cellar. It was cool and smelled of damp earth and cork. Rows of expensive vintage bottles lined the walls, floor to ceiling. Nikolai walked to the back wall, behind a dusty rack of French reds from the 90s. He didn't look for a handle. He reached behind the rack and pressed a specific brick. There was a click, a hiss of pneumatics. The entire rack swung forward. Behind it was a dark, narrow tunnel. The air that drifted out was stale and cold, smelling of history. Prohibition tunnels, Nikolai whispered. My grandfather used them to move liquor in the 20s. My father showed me when I was 10. He told me never to tell anyone, not even Ivan. He looked at me. Ivan doesn't know they exist. He ushered us inside. The space was tight, the walls made of rough stone. There was a single bulb hanging from a wire, but Nikolai didn't turn it on. He used the flashlight on his phone, keeping the beam pointed at the floor. He set Sasha down on the blanket he had spread out. Stay here, he told her. It is an adventure, okay? Like camping. Sasha nodded, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Camping. He turned to me. I have to go back up, he said. What? No. Nikolai, you can't. I have to finish this, Elena. If I don't, he will hunt us forever. We will never be safe. He checked his gun. He checked the clip. He slid it back into his holster. I replaced the house guard this morning, he said. My personal team from Moscow. They are loyal to me, not the family name. They are holding the perimeter. But even I have to do myself. He took my hands. His palms were warm. Wait for me. If I am not back in 2 hours? Don't, I choked out. Don't say it. If I am not back, take the tunnel west. It comes out in the woods, past the property line. My car is stashed there. Keys are under the mat. Drive to the city. Go to the FBI. I gripped his shirt. You are coming back. He looked at me. The intensity in his gaze burned. I have a reason to come back now. He kissed me. It was hard and fast and tasted of goodbye. Then he stepped back. He pushed the rack of wine bottles closed. The click of the lock was the loudest sound I had ever heard. We were alone in the dark. I pulled Sasha into my lap and wrapped the blanket around us. We waited.
Chapter 13. Nikolai. The iron door of the wine cellar clicked shut, sealing my heart inside the earth. I stood there for a second in the cool, damp silence, staring at the rack of vintage reds that hid the tunnel entrance. I could still feel the warmth of Elena's lips on mine. I could still feel the weight of Sasha's small arms around my neck. For 5 years, I had been a ghost, haunting my own life. I had moved through the motions of being the Pakan, hollowed out by grief and duty. But standing there in the dark, I felt something I hadn't felt since the explosion. I felt alive, and I was terrified. I turned away from the wall. The time for feeling was over. The time for violence had arrived. I moved through the house with a predator's quiet. The estate was silent, but it was a deceptive calm. I went to the main security hub in the West Wing. Victor was waiting for me. He was a mountain of a man, scarred and silent, who had served with me in Moscow. He was the only man in this hemisphere I trusted with my back. He stood when I entered, his eyes scanning me for injury. Status? I asked. Perimeter is secure, boss, Victor rumbled. The house guard has been relieved. I told them you ordered a rotation. They didn't question it. My men are in position at every exit. Good. And Ivan? He is in his suite. He is dressing for the celebration drink. I nodded. I checked the monitors. The cameras showed men in black tact gear, Victor's men, standing like statues at the gates and the doors. They weren't just bodyguards. They were soldiers. I have new orders, Victor. He waited. Ivan is coming to the study in 20 minutes. You are to let him pass. You are not to pat him down. You are not to check him for weapons. Victor frowned, a deep crease appearing between his brows. That is a risk, Nikolai. He is always armed. I know. I am counting on it. He looked at me, understanding dawning in his dark eyes. It has to be clean. It will be. One more thing, I said. If anyone asks about the nurse, Miss Rossi left the estate at 4 p.m. I fired her. Victor tapped the keyboard in front of him. A moment later, the digital log on the screen changed. Entry exit log. Elena Rossi. Exit 16 km. She is gone, he confirmed. I clapped him on the shoulder. Keep the channel open. When you hear the shot, come running. But not a second before. I went upstairs to the master suite. I didn't look at the empty bed where Katya had died. I went straight to the walk-in closet. I stripped off my shirt. I pulled the Kevlar vest from the hidden compartment in the wall safe. It was heavy, black, and ugly. I strapped it on tight, the Velcro tearing through the silence. It compressed my ribs, making it hard to take a deep breath. Good. It would remind me to stay sharp. I put on a fresh white dress shirt over the vest, buttoning it to the collar. It was tailored enough to hide the bulk, but I felt the difference. I put on my shoulder holster, checking the Sig Sauer P226, racked the slide. One in the chamber. I looked in the mirror. The man staring back wasn't the broken widower Ivan thought he controlled. He was the executioner. I walked down to the study. It was the room where my father used to read me stories. It was the room where Ivan had taught me how to launder money. It was a room of ghosts. I walked to the desk and opened the top drawer. I took out a small digital voice recorder. I taped it to the underside of the desk ledge, right where Ivan would be sitting. I pressed record. The tiny red light blinked once, then vanished. I poured 2 glasses of the 25-year-old scotch. I set them on the low table between the 2 leather armchairs. I waited. 10 minutes later, the door opened. Uncle Ivan walked in. He was wearing a velvet smoking jacket and a silk cravat. He looked like a king coming to survey his kingdom. He looked flushed with victory. Nikolai, he boomed, closing the door behind him. I see you have pulled out the good bottle. A fitting choice. He walked over and picked up a glass, swirling the liquid. He looked around the room, noting the darkness outside the windows. I noticed the new faces at the gate, he said, taking a sip. Moscow men. Victor's crew. I sat down in the chair opposite him, keeping my movements stiff. Fearful. I couldn't take chances, Ivan. After the gala, after the crash, I realized how exposed we were. The local guys are sloppy. I needed professionals. Ivan smiled over the rim of his glass. It was a predatory smile. Good. You are learning. Fear is a powerful teacher, nephew. It sharpens the senses. He sat down, crossing his legs. He looked comfortable. He looked safe. And the girl? He asked. The nurse? Gone. I lied smoothly. I paid her 50 grand to keep her mouth shut about the crash and sent her back to the city. She was becoming a liability. Ivan nodded, satisfied. Smart. Loose ends trip us up. Better to cut them loose early. He leaned back, expanding his chest. So, the Italians. The Don called me again. He wants the contract signed by Friday. It will be a new era for the Volkov family. We will be untouchable. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had bought me my first car. The man who had held me at my parents' funeral. "It is a beautiful dream, Ivan," I said quietly. "It is not a dream. It is reality. We have won." I took a sip of my scotch. It burned going down. "I have a question, Uncle." "Ask. The watch you were wearing at the funeral." Ivan paused. He blinked, clearly surprised by the change of subject. "Your father's watch. What about it?" "It was beautiful," I said. "Pristine." He frowned. "Yes, I told you. I found it in the wreckage. A miracle." I set my glass down on the table with a soft clink. "That is the problem, Ivan. A car bomb burns at 2,000 degrees. It melts steel. It turns glass to liquid. If that watch had been in the car, it wouldn't be pristine. It would be a lump of gold slag." The air in the room changed instantly. The temperature seemed to drop 20 degrees. Ivan went very still. He lowered his glass slowly to his lap. "What are you saying, Nikolai? I am saying you didn't find it in the wreckage. I am saying you took it off his wrist, before the bomb, before you murdered him." Ivan stared at me. For a long moment there was only the sound of the grandfather clock ticking in the corner. Then he laughed. It wasn't a nervous laugh. It was a genuine, amused chuckle. He shook his head, looking at me with something like pity. "I wondered if you would ever figure it out," he said. "You were always a bright boy, but so sentimental." I felt a cold fire spread through my chest. The recorder was rolling. He had just admitted it. "Why?" I asked. "Why wait 5 years? Why keep me alive?" Ivan stood up. He walked to the fireplace, turning his back to me. "Because the old guard loved your father," he said. "The captains were loyal to the bloodline. If I had taken the throne the day he died, there would have been a civil war. I needed a bridge." He turned around. His face was hard now. The mask of the benevolent uncle was gone. I needed a grieving son, a figurehead, someone to sit in the big chair and look sad while I consolidated power in the shadows. While I built the alliances your father was too weak to make. "He killed my driver," I said, "at the gala. That was you too." "Of course it was me. I needed to scare you. You were dragging your feet on the Italian marriage. I needed you terrified. I needed you to realize that without me, you are nothing." He took a step toward me. "And it worked, didn't it? Look at you. You called in the Moscow Guard because you are shaking in your boots. You are a frightened boy, Nikolai, just like you were that night in the alley. He was so arrogant. He was so sure of his victory that he couldn't see the trap closing around his neck." I stood up. I unbuttoned my jacket. "I am not a boy anymore, Ivan, and I am not frightened." Ivan sneered. He reached into his smoking jacket. I knew what was coming. I had planned for it. I had prayed for it. He pulled a gun, a snub-nosed revolver. "You are right," he said. "You are a liability. I should have finished the job 5 years ago." He raised the weapon. Click. The sound of my own draw was faster than thought. It was muscle memory drilled into me by 1,000 hours on the range. My cig was in my hand before his barrel leveled. Ivan's eyes widened. He saw the speed. He saw the intent. For the first time, he saw the executioner. "Nikolai, no." I didn't hesitate. I didn't give a speech. I pulled the trigger. Bang! The shot was deafening in the enclosed space. Ivan jerked back as if he had been kicked in the chest. The revolver flew from his hand, skittering across the hardwood floor. He slammed into the fireplace mantel, then slid down to the rug. Silence rushed back into the room, ringing in my ears. I kept my gun trained on him. I walked over. Ivan was gasping, clutching his chest. Blood was blooming dark red on his velvet jacket, right over his heart. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with shock. "You," he wheezed. "You. Soft." "Not soft," I whispered. "Patient." I watched the light fade from his eyes. I watched the man who had destroyed my life take his last, rattling breath. And then he was still. I didn't look away. I reached down and pressed 2 fingers to his neck. No pulse. It was over. I stood up. My hands were steady. My heart was slow. The door to the study burst open. Victor rushed in, gun drawn, 2 of his men right behind him. They scanned the room, saw the body, saw me standing over it. Victor holstered his weapon. He looked at Ivan, then at me. "Clean?" he asked. I reached under the desk and pulled off the recorder. I held it up. The red light was still blinking. "Self-defense," I said. "He confessed to the murder of the former Pakhan. He drew a weapon on the current Pakhan. It is all here." Victor nodded. He looked at the body with 0 emotion. "I will call the captains. They need to hear this. Do it. And call the police. We do this by the book. I want a coroner's report. I want no shadows left for anyone to hide in." Victor signaled his men to secure the scene. I walked to the window. I looked out at the dark grounds. Somewhere under that earth, in a cold tunnel, my future was waiting for me. I holstered my gun. "I am done," I said to the reflection in the glass. I turned my back on the dead man and walked out of the room. I had a promise to keep.
Chapter 14. Elena, time does not pass in the dark. It pools, it stagnates. It wraps around your throat like a cold hand and squeezes. I sat on the damp stone floor of the prohibition tunnel, my back pressed against the rough wall. The single bulb Nikolai had left off was nothing but a shadow above us. The only light came from his phone, which I had propped up on a wine crate, dimming the screen to save battery. It cast long, eerie shadows that danced every time I shifted. Sasha was asleep in my lap. She had fought it for the first hour, asking for Papa, asking for her bed, asking why we were camping in the basement. I had lied to her with a smile painted on my face. I told her it was a secret game. I told her the winner got ice cream for breakfast. Eventually, exhaustion won. She curled into a ball, clutching her stuffed rabbit, her breathing evening out into a soft, rhythmic puff against my chest. I envied her. I couldn't sleep. Every nerve in my body was a live wire. I stared at the heavy iron door at the end of the tunnel. It had been an hour, maybe 2. I had lost track. Nikolai had said 2 hours. If I am not back. I squeezed my eyes shut, forcing the thought away. He was coming back. He had to. He hadn't survived a car bomb and a loveless marriage and a decade of war just to die in a study wearing a tuxedo. He had a reason to come back now. I looked down at the engagement ring Katya used to wear. It wasn't on my finger. I would never wear it. But the ghost of her promise lingered. Protect her. A sound echoed through the tunnel. I froze. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I thought it might wake Sasha. It was a metallic clank. The sound of a heavy latch lifting. I reached for the flashlight Nikolai had left me, my fingers trembling. I turned it off. I plunged us into total darkness. If it was Nikolai, he would call out. If it was Ivan. I pulled Sasha tighter against me, covering her body with mine. I held my breath. The door creaked open, a groan of rusty hinges that sounded like a scream in the silence. Footsteps, heavy, slow. They crunched on the gravel floor. Elena? The voice was rough, hoarse. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. Nikolai. I didn't mean to shout, but the relief tore out of me. I fumbled with the flashlight, clicking it back on. The beam sliced through the darkness and hit him. He was standing 10 feet away. He was still wearing the white dress shirt, but it was ruined. Splatters of dark crimson stained the chest and cuffs. His hair was wild, his face was pale, stripped of all color in the harsh light. But he was standing. He was breathing. He raised a hand to shield his eyes from the glare. "Turn it off, Zaitchinok," he rasped. "It is me." I clicked the light off. The dim glow of the phone on the crate was enough to see him moving toward us. He dropped to his knees in the dirt. He didn't care about the suit. He didn't care about the mud. I scrambled forward, shifting, Sasha carefully so I didn't wake her. Nikolai caught me. He wrapped his arms around my waist and buried his face in my stomach, holding me so tight it hurt. He was shaking. Tremors ran through his broad shoulders, a physical release of tension that terrified me. "You're hurt," I whispered, my hands flying over his back, checking for bullet holes, for blood that was his. "I am fine," he mumbled into my shirt. "Not my blood." I let out a sob. I wrapped my arms around his head, pressing him closer. He smelled of copper and gunpowder and sweat. He smelled like violence. But underneath it all, he still smelled like rain. "Is he—" I couldn't finish the sentence. "He is gone," Nikolai said. His voice was flat, final. "It is over, Elena. The police are there now. Victor is handling the statement. Self-defense." He pulled back to look at me. His eyes were dark, bottomless pools of exhaustion. "I killed him." I looked him in the eye and I put a bullet in his heart. He looked down at his hands, as if surprised to see them still attached to his body. I thought I would feel, I don't know, triumphant, vindicated, and I just feel tired. I reached out and cupped his face. My thumbs brushed away a smear of dirt on his cheekbone. "It is okay to be tired. You have been fighting a war for 5 years. You can put the weapon down now." He leaned into my touch, closing his eyes. "Not yet," he whispered. "There is one more thing." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a leather-bound ledger. It was old, the corners worn. "I found this in his desk," he said, while I was waiting for the police. "It is Ivan's personal accounting." He opened it. Rows of numbers, dates, and names. "He was skimming," Nikolai explained. "He was stealing from the shipments before they even left the docks. And not just from us." He pointed to a column marked ITA. The Italians? He was double-crossing them. He was taking their money for protection and then selling their roots to the Albanians. He was planning to set them up for a federal raid the week after the wedding. My eyes widened. He was going to start a war. He was going to burn everything down and rule over the ashes. Nikolai closed the book with a snap. "I sent photos of these pages to the Dawn 20 minutes ago, along with the voice recording of Ivan confessing to the car bomb. And I made him an offer. I told him the marriage is off. I told him I am not my uncle's puppet, but I offered him 10% of our legitimate shipping routes as a peace offering." He paused, watching my face. "Legitimate?" I asked. "I am done with the guns, Elena. I am done with the drugs. I am pivoting the family, logistics, tech, shipping, legal money, clean money." He looked down at Sasha, who was still sleeping peacefully beside us. "I won't raise her in this life. I won't let her wonder if her father is coming home or if he is in a trunk somewhere." I felt a tear slip down my cheek. "You did all that in the last hour?" I had to. I had to make sure we were free." "And the Dawn?" I asked, holding my breath. He accepted. He was grateful for the warning about Ivan. He doesn't want a war with the Volkovs, especially not when we are offering him clean profit. Nikolai took my hands in his. His grip was warm, solid. "I am free, Elena. For the first time since I was 22, I belong to myself." The silence in the tunnel shifted. It wasn't heavy anymore. It felt lighter. It felt like the air before a sunrise. "So what happens now?" I asked. He looked at me. The intensity in his gaze made my stomach flip. "Now, I ask you a question. Here? In a tunnel?" He smirked, a ghost of his old arrogance surfacing. It seems fitting. We started in an alley. We might as well continue underground. He shifted, bringing his face closer to mine. I am not a good man, Elena. I have blood on my hands that will never wash off. I come with baggage that would crush a normal person. He brushed a strand of hair behind my ear. But I love you. The words hung in the air, glowing brighter than the flashlight ever could. I love you, he repeated, his voice gaining strength. I loved you when you were soaking wet in that alley. I loved you when I watched you from my car. I loved you when I was married to another woman and hating myself for it. He leaned his forehead against mine. I choose you. No alliances, no contracts, just you. If you will have me. I looked at him. I saw the scars. I saw the trauma. I saw the dangerous, broken, beautiful man who had walked through fire to get back to me. I didn't hesitate. I chose you 5 years ago, Nikolai, I whispered. I was just waiting for you to catch up. He let out a ragged breath, like he had been holding it for a decade. He kissed me. It was soft. It was gentle. It tasted of promise. Sasha stirred beside us. She rubbed her eyes, blinking in the dim light. Papa? She mumbled sleepily. Nikolai pulled back. He looked down at his daughter. The executioner was gone. The father was back. I am here, Sasha. Are we done camping? She asked, yawning. It is cold. He smiled. A real smile, one that reached his eyes and stayed there. Yes, baby. We are done camping. We are going home. He stood up and lifted her into his arms. He reached down and pulled me to my feet. He kept his hand in mine as we walked back to the heavy iron door. He pushed it open, leading us out of the dark and back into the house. It was still night outside, but as we walked through the kitchen, dodging the police lights flashing in the driveway, I knew the sun was coming.
Chapter 15. Nikolai 6 months later. Boredom, I decided, was the greatest luxury in the world. I sat at the head of the conference table in the glass-walled boardroom of Volkov Logistics. The view behind me was the Manhattan skyline, sharp and gleaming in the afternoon sun. The men sitting around the table weren't wearing tactical vests or carrying concealed weapons. They were wearing Italian suits and carrying iPads. They were talking about shipping lanes, tax brackets, and tech integration. Nobody had threatened to kill me all day. Nobody had mentioned a blood feud. It was excruciatingly boring, and I loved every second of it. Gentlemen, I said, standing up. The room went silent instantly. Old habits died hard. Even legitimate businessmen knew who I used to be. They knew the rumors. They looked at me with a mixture of respect and terrified awe. We are done for the day. Finalize the merger with the tech firm. I want the contracts on my desk by Monday. Yes, Mr. Volkov. I walked out of the office, my assistant scrambling to hand me my coat. I checked my watch. 4 p.m. I was leaving early. The old Nikolai would have stayed until midnight, brooding over territory maps and hit lists. The new Nikolai had a dinner reservation. Well, not a reservation, a promise. I took the elevator down to the private garage. Victor was waiting by the car. He wasn't wearing tactical gear anymore, just a standard suit, though I knew he still carried a piece. Old habits died hard for him, too. Home, boss? He asked, opening the door. Home, Victor. The drive to the Hamptons was smooth. The leaves were turning, painting the highway in shades of gold and crimson. When we pulled up to the gate, the feeling in my chest shifted. For years, driving through these iron gates felt like entering a prison. Now, it felt like exhaling. The house looked different. It wasn't just the fresh coat of paint or the landscaping. It was the energy. The windows were open. There were toys scattered on the front lawn. A pink bicycle, a soccer ball. It looked lived in. It looked messy. I walked inside. The silence of the mausoleum was gone. Instead, the house was alive. Music was playing, some pop song Sasha loved, coming from the kitchen. I loosened my tie, tossing my jacket over the banister. I followed the sound. The kitchen was warm. It smelled of garlic, roasted chicken, and baking bread. Elena was standing at the stove, stirring a pot. She was wearing leggings and one of my old dress shirts, the sleeves rolled up to her elbows. Her hair was in a chaotic bun, held together by a pencil. She was humming, swaying her hips to the music. Sasha was sitting at the island, her legs swinging. She was covered in flour. "Papa, she saw me first." She slid off the stool and ran to me. I scooped her up. She was getting heavy. She had grown 2 inches in 6 months. Her cheeks were round and pink, no longer pale with worry. "You are early," she accused, poking me in the chest with a flour-dusty finger. I escaped. I whispered conspiratorially. "Are you making a mess?" "We are making pizza," she declared. Mom let me roll the dough. The word hung in the air for a split second. Mom. It wasn't the first time she had said it. The first time, 3 months ago. Elena had frozen. Terrified I would be angry. Terrified she was overstepping. I had simply kissed her forehead. It wasn't replacing Katya. It was just the truth of who Elena was to her now. I looked at Elena. She turned from the stove, a wooden spoon in her hand. She was smiling, that soft, intimate smile that was reserved just for me. "Hey," she said. "You're home." I put Sasha down. "Go wash your hands, monster. You look like a ghost." Sasha giggled and ran to the sink. I walked over to Elena. I didn't stop until I was right in her space. I wrapped my arms around her waist, pulling her flush against me. She smelled like yeast and vanilla and home. "Hi," I murmured, leaning down to kiss her. She tasted of strawberries. "How was the boardroom?" she asked against my lips. "Did you scare any accountants?" "Only one?" He dropped his pen when I looked at him. She laughed, the sound vibrating against my chest. "Be nice, Nikolai. They aren't used to pakhans." "Ex-pakhan," I corrected. "Now I am just a logistics magnate and a pizza chef, apparently." I tightened my grip. I can think of better things to do on this counter than make pizza. She swatted my arm, blushing. "Nikolai. Sasha is right there." I looked over my shoulder. Sasha was busy making a soap beard in the sink, oblivious to her parents flirting. Parents. The word settled in my chest, warm and solid. I turned back to Elena. Her eyes were sparkling, gold flecks dancing in the brown. She looked happy. She looked safe. I couldn't wait anymore. I had the ring in my pocket for weeks. A custom design. Nothing like the heirloom rock I had given Katya out of duty. This one was modern, sharp, brilliant. Just like her. I reached into my pocket. "Elena," I said. My tone must have changed. The playfulness dropped from her face, replaced by a sudden awareness. "What is it? Is something wrong?" "No. Everything is right." I didn't kneel. It didn't feel right to kneel. We were equals. We had stood toe-to-toe in alleyways and burning cabins. I pulled her up onto the counter, settling her between my legs. It was exactly what I had wanted to do that night she cornered me in this kitchen, angry and beautiful in her scrubs. She looked down at me, her hands resting on my shoulders. "Nikolai?" I took her left hand. I rubbed my thumb over her ring finger. It was bare. "We have done this backward," I said. "We did the tragedy first. We did the war. We did the trauma." I looked into her eyes. "I am done with the dark, Elena. I want the light. I want the boring days and the quiet nights. I want to argue about paint colors. I want to grow old with you." I pulled the ring out. The diamond caught the kitchen light, blazing. She gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. No alliances, I whispered. No contracts, no duty, just us. Tears welled in her eyes. Marry me, Elena. Be my wife. Be Sasha's mother. Be the only thing that matters. She didn't speak. She just nodded, frantic and fast. Yes, she choked out. Yes! Nikolai, yes. I slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. I buried my face in her neck, breathing her in. The relief was staggering. I had spent my life thinking I was destined to be alone, destined to be a monster in a suit. But she had saved me. She had walked into the dark and pulled me out. Papa, are you making Mom cry? Sasha was standing next to us, wiping her wet hands on her pants. She looked concerned. I pulled back, keeping my arm around Elena. I looked down at my daughter. No, Zaichionok. These are happy tears. I picked Sasha up with my free arm, sandwiching her between us. Elena wiped her eyes, laughing through the tears. We are going to have a wedding, Sasha, Elena said. Sasha's eyes went wide. Can I wear a white dress? I laughed. You can wear whatever you want. I looked at the two of them. My family. My world. The sun dipped below the horizon outside the window, casting the kitchen in a golden glow. The pizza dough was rising. The music was playing. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't watching the exits. I was just home.
Chapter 16. Elena. They say rain on your wedding day is good luck. I say we have had enough rain for one lifetime. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in the master bedroom, smoothing the fabric of my dress. It wasn't a ball gown. It wasn't black velvet. It was simple white silk that slipped over my skin like water. It had thin straps and a low back, elegant and understated. I looked at my reflection. I didn't look like the terrified nurse who had driven through the iron gates 6 months ago. I didn't look like the woman who had huddled in a hunting cabin praying for sunrise. I looked happy. The door burst open behind me. Mom! Come on! You're going to be late! Sasha ran into the room. She was a whirlwind of white tulle and pink ribbons. She looked like a cupcake that had exploded. I turned around, laughing. I can't be late, Sasha. It's my backyard. She skidded to a stop, her hands on her hips. Her dark curls were already escaping the braid I had spent 20 minutes perfecting. Papa is waiting, she said seriously. He keeps checking his watch. Not the gold one, the new one. I smiled. The gold watch, Ivan's trophy, was gone. Nikolai had melted it down 2 days after he killed his uncle. He said he didn't want the ghost of his father's murder ticking on his wrist anymore. Is he nervous? I asked, kneeling down to fix her sash. He is pacing, she reported. Victor told him to sit down or he would dig a hole in the grass. I stood up. Well, we better go save the grass then. I grabbed my bouquet. It wasn't roses. It was wildflowers. Blue and white and yellow, tied together with a silk ribbon. I took Sasha's hand. We walked down the grand staircase together. The house was full of light. The windows were open, letting in the autumn breeze. The portraits of the stern ancestors were still there, but they seemed less imposing now, their glares softened by the sound of laughter drifting in from the garden. We walked out the French doors. The backyard had been transformed. White chairs were set up in rows on the lawn. String lights hung from the oak trees, beginning to glow as the sun dipped toward the horizon. It was a small crowd. Victor and his men, looking uncomfortable in suits that didn't hide their holsters. A few of my friends from the hospital, who still couldn't believe I was marrying a logistics magnate. And Dr. Peterson, who had cried when I invited him. But I only saw one person. Nikolai was standing under the wooden arch we had built together last weekend. He was wearing a black suit, tailored to perfection. His shirt was crisp and white, the top button undone because he hated ties. He was talking to Victor, looking serious, running a hand through his hair. Then he saw me. He went still. His hand dropped to his side. The conversation with Victor died instantly. He watched me walk down the aisle of grass. His eyes were dark, intense, and filled with a hunger that made my knees weak. But there was something else, there too. Peace. The shadows that had clung to him for 5 years were gone. The weight of the crown was gone. He looked like a man who had finally set down a heavy load. I reached the altar. Sasha let go of my hand and ran to stand next to Victor, who winked at her. "Hi," Nikolai whispered. "Hi. You look—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "There are no words." "You look okay too," I teased, "for a guy who hates weddings." "I love this wedding," he corrected. The ceremony was short. We didn't have a priest. We had a judge Nikolai had known for years, a kind man who knew better than to ask too many questions about the groom's past. We didn't write vows. We didn't need them. We had made our vows in a hunting cabin, in a tunnel, in a kitchen at midnight. "Do you, Nikolai Volkov, take this woman?" "I do," Nikolai said, his eyes never leaving mine. "I choose her. Every day." "Do you, Elena Rossi?" "I do," I whispered. "I choose him." The judge smiled. Then, by the power vested in me, "You may kiss the bride." Nikolai didn't wait. He stepped forward, wrapped his arms around my waist, and kissed me. It wasn't a polite wedding kiss. It was deep and possessive. It was a kiss that tasted of forever. The small crowd cheered. Sasha threw a handful of flower petals into the air, most of them landing on Victor's shoes. We walked back down the aisle, hand in hand, into the golden hour of the evening. The reception was chaotic and perfect. We ate pizza, because Sasha insisted, and drank expensive champagne. We danced on the patio under the string lights. I watched Nikolai laugh. A real, head-thrown-back laugh as Victor told a story about their time in Moscow. I watched him spin Sasha around until she was dizzy. I watched him look at me across the circle of people with a look that promised everything. Later, when the stars were out and the guests were starting to leave, Nikolai found me. "Ready?" he asked softly. "Ready." We left Sasha with Victor, who was currently teaching her how to play cards. We walked to the garage. Nikolai opened the passenger door of the black SUV for me, helping me in with my dress. He drove us out of the gates, down the winding road toward the coast. We pulled into the cemetery. It was quiet at night. The iron gates were locked, but Nikolai had the key. We walked through the rows of headstones, the moonlight casting long shadows on the grass. We stopped at the family plot. There was a new headstone next to his parents. Katya Volkov. Beloved mother. The earth had settled. The grass had grown over the scar in the ground. I knelt down, my white dress pooling on the dark earth. I placed my bouquet of wildflowers against the cold stone. "Hi, Kat," I whispered. The wind rustled the leaves of the oak tree where I had stood during the funeral. It sounded like a sigh. "We did it," I told her. "We are taking care of her. She is happy. She laughs all the time. She cheats at cards, though. I think she gets that from her father." I felt Nikolai come up behind me. He rested his hand on my shoulder, a heavy, grounding weight. He didn't speak to the stone. He didn't need to. His promise was living and breathing back at the house. I reached up and covered his hand with mine. "She would have loved the dress," I said. "She picked it out," he reminded me, "just like she picked you." I stood up. I leaned back against his chest, looking at the name carved in granite. "Do you think she knows?" I asked. "I think she knew before we did," he said. "She was smarter than both of us." We stood there for a long time, listening to the ocean in the distance. It wasn't a sad silence. It was a respectful one. We were paying our debts. We were acknowledging that our happiness grew from her sacrifice. "Come on," Nikolai said eventually, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. "It is getting cold." We walked back to the car, leaving the flowers bright against the dark stone. Nikolai opened my door, then walked around to the driver's side. He got in and started the engine. The dashboard lit up, casting a soft glow over his features. He didn't put the car in gear immediately. He turned to me. He reached into the center console and pulled out something. It was a small square frame. Inside, pressed behind glass, was a yellow, water-stained cocktail napkin. "Elena," and a number. I gasped. "You framed it?" "It is the most important contract I ever signed," he said seriously. I touched the glass. The ink was faded, barely legible, but it was there, the beginning of everything. I looked at him. "You were late," I whispered, repeating the words from that night in the alley. He smiled, a slow, devastating smile that made my heart stutter. "I got held up," he said. "Had to dismantle a criminal empire, kill a traitor, reinvent myself. Acceptable excuses, I decided." He reached out and took my hand, interlacing our fingers. "I promised to pick you up," he said softly. "And you did." He leaned across the console and kissed me. It was slow and sweet and full of a quiet joy that was terrifying in its intensity. We broke apart, foreheads resting together. My phone sat in the cup holder between us. It was silent. No emergency calls, no threats, no Uncle Ivan screaming that the world had ended, just silence. "Drive," I said. Nikolai shifted the car into gear. "Where to, Mrs. Volkov?" "Home," I said. He squeezed my hand. "Home." We drove out of the cemetery gates and onto the open road. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the path ahead. The rearview mirror was empty. Nobody was following us. We had the night. We had the silence. We had forever.